All right, what up? We're live. We are back. Sneaker Convos. I guess this would be considered the fireside chat. We're just going to hang out for a couple hours and see who pops on to say hello and introduce themselves and talk about the panels that they're going to be on later this week. But for now, we've got myself, Robbie Falchi, Rohit, Malhotra, Mike Guillory, and Joe Raaen. So Joe and I are the minds behind this whole concept. If you caught the first intro right before the Canada got the What the Canada podcast, which was incredible, we'll put that up on our social channels after this week is over, so you guys can catch it if you missed it, because they really had an incredible conversation and touched on a lot of things that I thought were really important about community. And really, that's really the main goal of this, is to, at least for me, is to kind of prove that the sneaker community exists. There's a lot of people that think that it's not a community, and I have 15 years of working in this that says absolutely the opposite. I have friends like these guys, and 30 more panels to come, 29 more panels to come. I can't remember how many there are in total, but I'm just appreciative to be able to meet good people through a passion for sneakers. And yeah, I'm stoked to kind of see where tonight takes us and what we can do and have conversations about. So welcome, fellas. I guess maybe we'll start with Joe, and we'll do a brief intro, and then we'll toss it around so everybody else can kind of introduce themselves as well.
Yeah, it's funny that you said, 30 panels, Nick, because when you and I had first talked about it, it was like, oh, great. Like, you'll get 5, I'll get 5. We'll have 10 throughout the week, and that'll keep people kind of interested. And, next thing I know, I'm working on my 4 or 5 measly panels, and Nick's like, I got 25, Joe. And I was like, oh, right. This is exactly who I thought Nick was. Give this guy a bone, and he's going to go for it. But I think what's really great about it, and I'll say it again for the folks, and I'll include you guys this time because you guys are definitely part of that. So I didn't just mean it to the Canada boys, but I think that specifically for the last year, obviously, listening to all the different sneaker podcasts and a lot of the different sneaker personalities really had a huge help on my mental health. It really hurt my credit rating, but at the end of the day, it was you guys were on I drove cross country this summer, and it was jonesing for another episode of either if there was you guys or Canada guys or some of the other Soul Searching or the Secret Closet Pod or the Sneak Disc that I listened to. But it's I have these memories of you guys all summer just driving cross country. I drove to the West Coast and back because that seemed like it was the safest way to go see my parents in California. I just think that what you guys do, I don't know, you hear it a lot from the Discord, but I think what everybody does is it's a real escape, but a legitimate escape. I kind of prefer to listen to them, not necessarily watch them, because I can't. It's hard for me to sit still. But the memories that I think that I have of sneakers over this past year, just walking around New York, listening to all these podcasts, and kind of jonesing for more, and then running home to buy said shoe that somebody reminded me of. Really kind of gave me, a lot of the inspiration to, even reach out to Nick and say, hey, man, do you want to come do these panels that I'm doing for my agency and the CES thing that I was putting together? And then it was pretty obvious when we were doing them towards the end of CES, I'm always programmed to, start thinking about South by, because South by used to be my favorite place. It still maybe is, but it hasn't existed for the last 2 years. But so many great memories. And then Nick and I started talking about, hey, he's got great memories of South by, and it was it just seemed like an obvious thing. Well, let's just take all those. We just did 2 panels during CES. Let's do more, and let's call it something we're not supposed to call it now, but it might be called North by Sneakers next year. If this was opposite day, you guys would know what I'm talking about, because we're just not allowed to say South and X or 4 without using South by Southwest, which we're definitely not part of, in case anybody's watching and you guys are worried about us. But I just wanted to make sure that everybody that's tuning in knows that this whole week of content is about building this community and seeing what kind of good we can do and what kind of purpose we could have outside of listening to your favorite shoes. How do we give back to people like you guys? How do we give back to our communities through sneakers, which is fun for us and a lot easier to motivate people through things that are fun for them and that they're excited about. So really excited that Nick let me be a part of all of this, and can't wait to see all the content this week. It's going to be a lot of fun, and it was great to meet all you guys. So I'll shut up and let you guys get the show going.
I'm super thankful that you kind of made this all happen, Joe, and planted the seed, as the Canadian fellas said. It really was something that I think it just was like a great idea and necessary. And I think I'm exactly on the opposite side of that. Like, you being a part of our community with the Sneaker History Discord and all of that. This year plus has been insane to have the support of all these, people that I didn't know, a year ago, right? Or a year and a half ago. And, with talking to Mike and Rohit and Robbie every week was like a check-in for me to really just kind of like get out of the funk of what the last year of the pandemic has been too. And then to have other people that are listening, like joining our Discord and joining our Patreon and all these places where it's like, they're experiencing the same thing. And I think like that's what's so beautiful about, I think, the podcasting platform to me. And I think, to some extent YouTube as well, but with YouTube, you run into a lot of the kind of, you run into a lot of the trolls, you run into people that there's a lot of bots. I mean, we don't even have a huge following and we get a ton of weird comments and stuff like that. So like the coolest part about this whole thing with podcasts is it feels like I know everybody, right? And then combine that with a Discord and, the stuff that we're doing, it's just been crazy. So, Robbie, Mike, how you guys doing? How you feeling? What are you guys feeling about the podcast over the last year? We've gone from like, less than a handful to
nothing
significantly more. So
nothing to something. I remember the first time we talked about it. I don't know what we were doing. And we were like, man, we can do that. I think we can jump into this pool of things. And I mean, we started March of 2019, and we're 2 years in, 200 episodes in. It's awesome, man. I mean, I've always wanted to find a way to be a part of the sneaker community more than just giving my dollars to all these stores. But this has been awesome, especially getting to know you guys, getting to know everybody in Discord, getting to know people, the Canada boys, all these people we've been in contact with has been awesome. And like you said, people always say, oh, they look at the bad part of it, but we see like this community and it does exist and is super awesome. Heck, I mean, I know it's shoes, but I learned something like every day. I mean, from the business side to the technology side, and heck, that's what pushed me into doing the YouTube. And it's nice because, like you said, we hear those people who've gone through the last year. Just, man, this has helped them through the time of just not being able to do anything, and it helps me as well, being able to keep my mind going and be able to talk to you guys. So, I mean, I enjoy it, man. I wouldn't change it for the world.
And what's crazy is that I didn't even know we were at 200 episodes until the Discord told me. The Discord is where I find a lot of my information out. My own life, which that is bar none the craziest, coolest, most eye-opening part of all of this is when somebody listens to something you say and they then take the time out of their life to then bring it up to you later. Mm-hmm. We talk so much, I don't know what I say half the time. So it's a really cool, like, man, you were that attentive. Like, you beat me on that test. And like, I was the one giving the test. Like, you're amazing. So just having that kind of feedback from positive comments to negative comments, and it's not even all that negative. That's the best part. Our negative comments are your audio sucks. I can deal with that. Like, that's cool. It's been a good way to talk about shoes. That's a really dumb thing. Of course, it's a shoe podcast, but in my day-to-day life, I don't like talking about shoes all that much. I mean, I'm getting to the point where it's just like you feel a little jaded, and then the podcast rejuvenates you. It's like the podcast is Mike handing you the bottle full of secret stuff, and you drink it down, and now I can go do some crazy stuff with Speedy Bird. I don't know, but it's just it's a big uplifting feeling that I get. Feeling of uplift. Yeah.
No, and shout out to all the people that put up with our audio for the first few months of us figuring it out, trying different platforms that definitely didn't work. We are so grateful that you stuck with us through all that, because we definitely had some serious challenges. Because one of the things that like we were always trying to do is like use a specific platform, and there's a lot of options out there. And I think like we were trying to make it easy on ourselves, but we also were like, because people were listening and giving us that feedback, I think we were all kind of like, look, we just got to commit to this. We got to, like, we're all, you know, mic'd up. We've got the rooms behind us now. Like from the very beginning, like this looks completely different, right? Like we were all in a different vibe with it. And that's because like people wanted to hear what we were talking about and talk with us about it. Right. And I think like that's been so cool to, you know, because it is really like interesting to kind of like have your failures on the platform as it goes, right? But yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna shut up because I'm rambling here, but yeah.
No, but I mean, it's to kind of piggyback off what you said. People watched us fail and struggle through the first 50 episodes, and when I go back and listen to those, I literally will laugh because like, man, this was a struggle. But going to what we've done now has just been a huge change, a huge growth, and it's all because we had the support of everyone listening to us. Because, like you said, for some reason, which I appreciate every one of them, y'all wanted to listen to us, and that pushed Robbie say I did the same thing, right. But that pushed us to make it better, so that way it was actually enjoyable for you guys in the car or at the office or wherever you were during whatever time. So just many thanks. We appreciate all the feedback, all the listening, and I think we owe a lot of people a lot of M&Ms. So
yeah, definitely. All right. Well, I got a special guest here that's going to hop in just a second. So let me see here. All right. I'm gonna throw him on here. Mike, you're good for another few minutes, or you got to bounce?
Yeah, I got a couple minutes.
Okay, cool. What up, Seth?
How's it going?
Yo.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
So, Seth, I got Robbie, Mike. These guys were the co-hosts of the Sneaker History podcast with me.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
good to meet you guys.
I just, we're just kind of playing this by ear, trying to figure it out and see who else pops on. But I figured I'd have you on. I know that we got a little mix up on the timing, so we won't be able to get you into one of the panels. But I thought I'd bring you on and kind of share in this. Like it's gone from like a small little let's have a few conversations with friends to like 30 panels over the course of 4.5 days. So
that's
5
awesome.
days. So I don't know where it's headed, but I also have one other person on here that I'm going to add real quickly.
Sweet.
Hey.
What's up? I got to really fix my lighting here. I don't know what the hell's happening with this, but
we're just getting
it's going to be a
Good.
mess. Yeah. We're going to leave it. It's just going to stay, I guess, kind of dark. I couldn't figure out how to get the shade off this thing. So what's going on,
good,
guys?
man.
How's it going?
So I was just telling Seth, he just popped on too. Like I started this idea with my friend Joe, who is listening in, but I started this as like, let's have a few conversations with friends about the kind of, I guess it would be like a state of the union about sneakers, right? And then it kind of morphed into like, I've texted too many people at this point to keep it at a few conversations. So over the next 4 or 5 days, we're going to do like 30 plus panels, conversations, podcasts. Like I just wanted to kind of really kind of frame this in a different way than the narrative that we all see every day, right? Because, as Russ and I talked about, if you listen to the Sneaker History podcast a few months ago, or even as Seth and I talked about on Outside the Box a few months ago, there's so much negativity out there. And like, at the same time, like I have all you guys that I consider friends because of this stuff. And I think that's like just a crazy, it's like a complete mind fuck in so many ways, right? Because on one hand, we're like frustrated almost every day with some dumb shit that happens. On the other, like, look, I'm stoked that Russ is going to write a book. I'm stoked that Seth has got his own sock brand. Like I can't put them up on screen. I'm not that flexible, but I'm wearing them right now. So like, like that kind of stuff is just like, it's so cool to me. And I think that, I'm thankful for you guys, supporting, because obviously, in the sneaker world, there's plenty of places where, even just having people come on for this, plenty of people said, what's your budget? How much can we get paid to do this? And I totally respect that. Like I think that's a great opportunity for people. I would love to be able to get paid to do that kind of stuff too. But at the same time, I just didn't want to make this about that. I just wanted it to be something like, this is the shit that we would have done 10, 15 years ago when it's a Nike Talk meetup, or, randomly you're in New York and like you text everybody that's into sneakers, and you're, now eating with 10 or 15 people at a pizza spot that only holds 3 people, right? Like that's kind of how sneakers has been for me. And that's kind of where I just like is what I was thinking about as this kind of evolved. So I guess like, Seth, one of the things I was going to ask you, like, obviously you have such a presence now, like you've grown so much in the past few years. Like, how do you avoid the kind of the negativity and the trolls that are out there? Because I know you've got to deal with it probably tenfold, and we deal with it a little bit on our stuff with a smaller audience. So what does that look like, and how do you step away from it, or I don't know, man, how do you do it?
I think it's a lot of just not taking it personally, and something that I've tried to do, especially as I've gotten older, is sort of separate this sort of like public sneaker lifestyle from my actual life, and that's something I found really sort of beneficial to me, so I can sort of step away from it completely. And so even if I get a comment saying something like, I don't know, the comments that really suck are ones that are like really close to home, and they're saying something that you're like, that's not true, but it really hits hard. It's that sort of stuff. So it's just being able to step away from it, I think, is the biggest thing for me. And like I found in the past, I've sort of fed into it, and that's just like a rabbit hole that you're never gonna get out of. I'm like responding to comments that are you're never gonna win that. And even if you do think that you've won that, it's either a bad look on your part, or it's just not worth the time. So I don't know. I think it's something that we all have to deal with. Anyone who has any kind of presence online, whether you got 10 Instagram followers or you're like, someone on CNN, like you're going to have issues. And I think just everyone, I think needs to be able to step away from it a little bit, Yeah, not great advice, but.
No, I mean, this is what Russ and I talked about a little while back. And honestly, Russ and I have been probably talking about this for 10 years, right? Like
something like that.
It's one of the other things that I'm really trying to like bring to the surface in some of these conversations. Like if you look at the schedule, there's people that are, work as therapists as their, in their day job. There's people that work in that world of, making sure that people don't lose their shit, basically, right? Because the other flip side of all this stuff that goes on is like we also are kind of in a spot where we want to be involved because we've all been stuck inside for a year plus, right? Like we want to be involved because we feel like, hey, this is a way to connect with people. And I think just generally speaking, the last year plus has been a complete like miss of being able to socialize, right? And whether like you guys know, I'm very much antisocial socializer, right? Like I'm like very selective with my time. I need the balance. I'll disappear for a week and might not text you back, but then like I also want to come hug you at the same time, right? It's like this is just where I end up in it. And I think so. I guess Russ, like we've talked about it before, but like what's with sneakers lately, obviously it's almost like doubling down on the like craziness of what Twitter has become, right? It's like, you know, you've got like politics on one side, and then you've got just like this barrage of like chaos and the sneaker thing. And I follow too many people on Twitter already, but I know you follow even more people than me. So I don't know how you keep your sanity other than the bike rides, which I got a trainer that will be put together this weekend. So that'll be nice.
Well, I was going to say, I kind of don't. I mean, I think that's the way I keep my sanity is like, it's gone. So, you know, oh, well, we'll see you again sometime. You know, and I think, yeah, I follow way too many people. And like every once in a while, I'll go back through and like kind of winnow out, which I haven't done in a while. But I mean, I've actually unfollowed a lot of like, and I mean, obviously not you, you know, but a lot of sneaker really,
real quick.
yeah. No, I mean, people who are literally like sneakers only, or I finally unfollowed like almost all of the blogs and all of the brands, like as far as on Instagram or on Twitter. I mean, at this point, so much stuff is set up in front of you that you literally can't buy anymore, you know? And like, I've gone off on rants about this before, and like, it doesn't apply to me much anymore because I really haven't been buying anything. You know, I've bought maybe one pair in the past like year and a half, like, and I just don't even try anymore. Like, I deleted the sneakers app off my phone. Like, I understand they do editorial style stuff, but it's not worth it to me. Like, I don't need to deal with that in my life at all. You know, and I'm curious to know sort of how many other people have used this sort of shutdown as just a time to like pause and look at all the stuff they've accumulated already. You know, I think, and I've tweeted about this, where sneaker quote unquote culture now has been reduced to just consumption, you know, and like, it's kind of hilarious to say of course it's consumerism. I mean, that's what it's always been. Yes. But for a while, or for a very long time, buying the shoes was just such a small part of it. You know, it's like you were picking that one pair to get that you really wanted and then wearing it and doing all this other stuff. And now it's just, there's so many releases so fast. All you can do is keep buying.
Yeah.
And at this point, all you're doing is buying it and posting it on Instagram or on Twitter or whatever. Like, if you look at my Instagram, like, I haven't posted an actual Instagram post since December. And I think the last thing I posted was a pair of Joachim Noah Lecoq Sportifs, because he announced that he was going to retire. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of ran out of things to I don't know. I feel like, and this is like a whole separate conversation. And if you're having 30 separate conversations over 4 days, maybe this is one of them. But, you know, I feel like we've all become like almost involuntary marketing people, you know, and we're doing all this work for free. Like, how much stuff is getting put out there in front of people's faces? You know, I mean, I look at my social accounts and like, you know, and it's small compared to other people, but it's like 40,000 Twitter followers and 20,000 Instagram followers. You know, when I first started working in journalism, I was working in a weekly paper that had a circulation of 1,200. And I think we talked about it in our conversation. Like, it's crazy to think that like I just type something on my phone that reaches 40 times that amount of people.
Insane.
Yeah, because
you know, so
you
it's
probably
like,
put in years to get to 1,200 circulation at that paper too.
Right. And that had like multiple employees and whatever else. So it's like, I don't know. I kind of hit a point where I'm like starting to think twice about like, wait a minute. So why am I Instagramming these like random shoes? Like, why am I doing, chances are good, Nike's work for them, you know, when there's really nothing coming back the other way. So, you know, and even with buying, I've had that thought too, where it's like, I have how many pairs of shoes and like, how many of those do I actually wear? Like, what is getting a new pair doing for me at this point? Why would I want to do that? I realize I've kind of completely gotten so far off the track of what the initial question was, and I don't even remember what it was anymore.
That's actually a great direction though, because one of the things that in the time that since I've talked to both of you guys on the podcast, I connected with some high school kids that have a company called Soul Purpose NYC, and they are collecting shoes and handing them out to the homeless in New York City. And I think that that's something that, like, I just was blown away that, like, high school kids are doing this, right? Like, to me, it was like, man, like, I'm 41, 42, I'm 40 something.
However
Like,
old we all are.
and like I'm not doing that right now. And like that became one of my goals for this year. Like I've already talked to a few people that hopefully will be involved in this at some point, either tonight or over the next few days. But like I want to figure out a way to give back, right? Like the same thing that you're saying, like, and you've been doing it in your own way, right? Like I think just as humans, we get to a certain point of, like, with consumerism, and sometimes, yeah, you're creating, and sometimes you're doing it for the brand. Sometimes you're just doing it because it's, like, it's like having conversations with you guys, and I enjoy that. And then the other part is like, hey, like Seth has turned this into, a full-on business, right? Like, I think that, like, I'm somewhere in the middle of that, right? Like, I try to stay away from the business aspect of it to a certain extent with sneaker history, because I don't want it to go down that path. But at the same time, like, I spend so much time with it, I should be more serious about it. But who knows? Like, with this whole conversation with the Soul Purpose guys, I kind of just thought, man, what if all that I'm doing is supposed to be a charity spin, right? Like, if I'm supposed to be creating all this, like, energy in order to give back, because, like, I'm just going to put it out into the universe. Like, I want to just, like, drive around the city and find kids in parks and hand out shoes out of the back of a U-Haul one day, right? Like, that would just be a blast to me, because me at 16 or 17 would have been off my rockers excited about it. Like, I would have ran through every neighborhood screaming that I got a free pair of shoes at that age. And, like, I know that we are, 30 years past that, but, like, it's also one of those things that I think, like, it gets me feeling much better about it. Robbie, before you guys hopped on, Robbie used the analogy of, like, the conversations we've been having on the podcast almost made sneakers enjoyable again for us, right? Because we're not out there in the weeds. We're not waiting for, yes, we're talking about stuff that's coming out sometimes, but we're talking about all sorts of random stuff. And half the time we're talking about candy or food or something else, right? It's not really about the shoes. But, like, he said it best, where he said, it's almost like the podcast became Mike's secret sauce for us, right? And that's kind of the analogy that, like, has stuck in my head, tonight, because it really was something that, like, I was feeling a little burnt out on things, but I obviously am, like, I do a lot of this stuff during the day, and then I do a lot of this stuff at night, right? Like, it's like nonstop for me. So I have to figure out how to balance it. And, it's one of those things where, like, I think, I've had a conversation with probably every one of you guys at some point where I'm like, maybe I should be doing content and work in a different space in order to have that balance, because inevitably it is challenging when you're in it all the time. But I don't know.
I think with both Seth and Russ, I'm sure both of you gentlemen, in everyday life, you're going to be a lot more stoked if someone brings up a restaurant you like more than the last 4 times ago Adidas release, So it's just like having those other conversations and splitting it. You can still have all the shoe fun, but it's also way more fun just chopping it up. And let's talk about that bowl of ramen you had, something just delicious and connecting on a human level.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, definitely.
It's like our WandaVision episodes. I mean, I know all of our viewers get to see how much of a nerd we are, but I mean, yeah, I love shoes, but then stuff like that, I mean, hey, I'll get me going for hours, man. Just talk about just other things I enjoy. But it just kind of, I guess it all ties together the community. Like, we all bond over sneakers, but then we can talk about other things, like Robbie mentioned, that bowl of ramen or whatever else is out there. It's just, I think people have to realize it's okay to talk about something else. If you don't, Russ mentioned it, we're not getting necessarily paid by anybody. We're doing work for them. Cool, let's post a shoe, but it's cool to talk about something else. No one's going to say, oh, you're not getting that release now. You didn't talk about us this week. We got to just be normal humans, and I think it's going to be all right.
I think it's hard too, because it's like you get to a point, and I, like Nick, am 40 something, only for a little while longer. But you know, you reach a point where it's like, how many times can you retell the same story? And you know, what is there really a different story to tell? And I don't know if there is around, especially certain retro product. And like, you know, we're at the point where we've been in this long enough. We've seen the same shoe come back now 4, 5, 6 times. And it's like, do I really want to talk about the, you know, the white cement Jordan 3 again? Like, is there ground that hasn't been covered on that specific shoe yet? You know, do I want to get into the whole like free throw line story again? And, you know, at some point it's almost no. And not that the story isn't important, not that the 88 dunk contest isn't a good thing, but like, I don't want to talk about it in a shoe centric way anymore, you know. And I'm kind of reaching the point, and again, Nick, I don't know if you will reach this point, but you might. So take this as a warning from the ghost of, you know, you know, I've kind of reached the point with a lot of this retro stuff that I don't even want the shoe anymore. You know, it's like, it's either I had it and that's fine, and now, you know, I don't need it again, or I'm kind of finally reaching a point in my brain, like, I don't know why it took so long to settle in, but it's like, just because I didn't have something back then doesn't mean I need it now. Like, do I really want like the rest of my life to be like seeking vengeance on my parents for not buying me a Paul when I was in 9th grade? Like, let it go. It's fine that you didn't have all this stuff. You know, it's like,
true.
We all went through, like, I'm sure, years of having like your one good pair of school shoes and like whatever the next pair was. And, and none of us like grew up that bad. I came across my 99 pair recently.
See, you don't need the 2021 pair. You got the leather.
Now I'm looking around like what's sitting around here, but
see, I think now the next, this is interesting because Seth is kind of like on the other side of this conversation, right? Where he's like, he's doing the stuff and getting the new releases, but he's also like making his own shoes now, which is crazy. Like, I still can't like fathom doing that. So like, do you think that's something that actually keeps things from getting stale for you, Seth? Is that like one of the tricks to this? Do Russ and I need to collab on an RBNE sneaker of some kind?
Well, first of all, I'll tell you right now that I went to school for industrial design, not sneaker design, and I've very quickly learned that they're very different, and I'm much less talented at sneaker design. So you guys would, first of all, if you came out with a sneaker, it would kill it, first of all, because you guys really have that sort of like decades of just like sneaker history that you can draw upon. But for me, it was like, reviewing sneakers. I started out, I always loved sneakers, but you know, it was one of those things back in like, I got into the sneaker, I guess, not even journalism, because I don't really consider YouTube journalism. It's more of like just someone sitting in their room. But I guess for me, I got into that kind of late. I got into it in like 2016, and that was the time when like, you know, everyone had kind of been seeing all the sneaker reviews before. So I got into it doing that. And that was great for a couple of years because for me, it still felt fresh. But then recently, like in probably 2019, so not too long ago, I realized that really design was kind of had always been my passion, and that was sort of where I wanted to take things. So that you're right, that has really been a big way of me keeping it fresh for myself. And even on my channel, I've kind of slowed down on the sneaker reviews. I haven't stopped them completely because that's really honestly where, you know, most of the people find my channel. But that's been a lot more interesting because for me, it's such a huge learning experience because someone who's not a sneaker designer, who's not a footwear designer, and would love to be one day, you know, it's been really, really cool to see. It's been really, really cool to experience. And as much as I love, you know, talking about like the next, like you said, the next white cement Jordan 3, which by the way, needs the retro because I actually don't have a pair of those. That's, you know, the design side of things is a lot more interesting, and looking up to those designers, and that's been sort of what's really given me a lot of excitement in the sneaker community.
Yeah, it is interesting too. Like, I think someone asked about like the next generation and the collector's nature and like what people like the stories that become valuable to them. And one thing that stuck out about our conversation from a couple months back, Russ, was, making the story your own, right? Like your story with your Supreme dunks is, I am not like a Supreme fan. I'm not a Supreme consumer. I'm a fan of what the brand is and has become.
I feel like you represent another city. I'm not sure which one. I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah, you might be able to tell. Huh?
You're not a stan.
But like with Supreme, like I've never been like the guy that's buying a lot of Supreme stuff. I have a few things here and there, but like it was never a big deal to me. But your Supremes specifically make me want that shoe more than anything I've seen before, because it's you and 20 something years of New York City and probably riding BMX at the Brooklyn Banks and all of the things you've done throughout the years. I mean, rest in peace to Eisenberg's, where we used to get breakfast, man. They just shut down. And it's just like
so bad.
All that kind of stuff is I have a hard time. And the reason why I'm trying to like get more and more people involved in this and have more of these conversations, especially with like a younger audience, is because I have a hard time really kind of understanding what that is now, right? Because we've gotten to the point where it seems like the conversation about sneakers is no longer about the shoes or what you do in them or stand in line to get them or the experiences of like, hey, I went and did this with my homies kind of thing. And it's almost like we are at a point where it's like, hey, I made, $100 off of these or whatever. And, I don't have anything against that. Like if that's what people do, that's what people do. Like we're, obviously in a crazy ass time, beyond sneakers anyway. And I know that people definitely, there's plenty of people that are unemployed that are using sneakers to make a little bit extra money to keep the lights on. I mean, I am not selling shoes, but like I'm in that same boat of like, hey, I got to do what I got to do to keep things moving forward, because it's been a crazy year and a half of change. So I kind of wonder like if there, what that next evolution of our shared passion becomes, right? Is it designing shoes? Like there's so many different ways it can go, but I'm trying to, at least for me personally, avoid the negative stuff, which means a hell of a lot less time on Instagram. Unfortunately, I'm still like a fiend for Twitter. That's my favorite platform by far. But like, it's all these different ways of like continuing to have conversations. Cause like, even just you hopping on tonight and having people in the chat talking about Mo Peterson jerseys and your Jordan jersey hanging up in the background is like, that kind of stuff still makes me happy, like that's what I still love about this. So, I mean, I think that like, there's something out there that's still driving people to want to wear these shoes and want to be a part of it. But I'm hoping that, throughout these conversations, we can kind of figure out what that is for other people. Cause I definitely see, the same kind of stuff that we all can see as like the challenges of it. But at the same time, like, I do think that there's opportunity for, whatever that Mike's secret sauce is, analogy is for the next generation, it's going to be there somehow or another. And it's not going to be the same as what it is for us, because we obviously have completely different experience and a different time. And, I think like you said, we've become the marketing for Nike as opposed to wanting to be a part of the story with Nike as a kid or in our younger days. And I think like, who knows what that next thing is going to be, but I hope that I'm still around for it is all, I guess.
Well, I think a lot of it, and to use the Supreme as a jump off point, I think, and that's where I worry with some of the storytelling stuff from my perspective, or from our perspective with writing about it, is like, you start to wonder, like, wait a minute, people are taking totally the wrong thing from this. Like, if I talk about the Supreme Dunks and tell my story around those, I don't want the end result of that for some kid to be like, oh my God, I need to find out how to get like $8,000 to buy a pair of these, which by the way, the prices on those are absolutely terrifying now. The takeaway from that should be like, wait a minute, what's my version of that? Like, what is the shop that I love in 2021? What are they doing? What's coming out that excites me enough that I want to figure out a way to get that and make that kind of my own thing. Like that's where a lot of the retro stuff starts to get a little iffy for me, because, you know, I'm old enough that retro didn't exist when I was a kid. You know, like Foot Locker didn't have a wall of 100 shoes. You know, there was the top of the line stuff from each brand, and that was the stuff you were into. And once it went out of production, it was just an old shoe. Mm-hmm. And obviously there were people out there like Babito and, you know, and Search and Pete Nice, like all those guys digging stuff up, but that didn't really exist in the suburbs. I mean, dead stock was literally just dead. You didn't need that. Yeah. You know, so for now, and like I said before, with stuff getting re-retroed, like it's just a big, heavy churn of like these key silhouettes from the 90s and 2000s. And like, there's so much more out there, you know, like, I guess that goes back to like where it's like, I would rather talk about a different shoe entirely than rehash the freaking, and Seth, I don't mean to like pile on the white cement Jordan 3, but like there's so much more. There's so much more than that. And there's more than Michael Jordan 2 for that matter. And like, I'm waiting to get struck by lightning, but you know, it's like, I don't know. There's so much that's unexplored that ends up being glossed over because of these primary things.
Yeah. So I'm gonna bring somebody into the chat right now that so none of us have any kids, right? Just to make sure.
No.
Okay. No. So John Ratner has been in the sneaker thing for quite a while, and he actually just started a podcast called Sneaker Dads, and I think he has an interesting kind of lane, right? Where, you know, as somebody who has been into sneakers for quite some time, now can kind of look at like, hey, there's this next generation of kids that are going to come up into this. And what was interesting, so he was on the podcast, or the Canada podcast that we ran, you know, to start this whole event off. And one of the things that he talked about was, well, besides toppling boxes onto kids, which I know was not you know, an intentional thing, but it was interesting because like there's like there's like this shift in, I think, consuming versus specifically just sharing the stories, right? Like I'm right behind Russ in terms of like, I'm almost completely over having the physical shoes, but I'm also still enjoying having the conversations about it. I enjoy, you know, hearing somebody like John talk about it, hearing Robbie's stories, seeing Seth's, you know, designs. Like, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that still gets me excited about it. And to your point, Russ, there's a, you know, I don't want to get struck down by lightning either, but like there are more stories out there. And like, that's what I'm wondering, like, how do we get to a point where the stories aren't the same stories repeated? Because even though we all have individual stories, I think that, you know, there's an interpretation of like, you know, going to toss this to John, like how he's telling these stories, and, you know, as a Sneaker Dads podcast, also getting a lot of younger people listening to the podcast and giving him feedback on it.
You know, I think we might have to. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
I think we might have to accept, and it's hard for older people like me sometimes to accept the fact that sneakers may never fall out of favor again. They may be popular, they may be hyped for a long time, maybe ever. Whatever that does to resale prices is another conversation. But you know, I think about that, and you asked me a little bit about the dad perspective, and you know, I try to influence my son to have right values when it comes to consuming anything and you know, buying and having things and so on, and so it's hard when he looks at my sneaker collection. And Nick, you mentioned this, I think, the other day. You were talking about how exactly what you said there in terms of how you know, you don't necessarily need as much, and there's other ways to do it. And I try to share those values with him, that, you know, you don't need to have a big collection that you're sitting on. And Russ knows that you know, wearing everything is about that. It's like shoes are meant to be worn, not necessarily to be hoarded. A lot of people have huge, wonderful collections that are like museums, but deep down, it's really about wearing your stuff and feeling good about it. But again, it's hard to accept the fact that things might have changed forever. And I was talking to someone today about the popularity of runners in Asics. I said, Asics will come back. People will start rocking gel-like 3s again when the hype of Jordan 1s and all those things die down, and they may, but I'm not so sure that it's going to be like it was 10, 50, 20 years ago. I think it's changed forever, and I think we have to accept it.
You know what's funny, and like I've been thinking about this a little bit. Sometimes I think the kids have it right. Sometimes I think we should let the kids take over and like we should just let them do whatever. I just remember walking by high school in the Lower East Side all the time, and you see a lot of kids in Kyries and kids in KDs and, just kind of wearing whatever the current signature product is. And it's like, I feel like we're the ones who get them into thinking like, oh, we got to have these retro Jordans or retro whatever. And it's like, don't listen to us. Like we don't know what we're talking about. Like you guys are doing it right. Like support the current athletes, like wear the current stuff. Like sometimes I think we should be doing that too. Instead of, like I said before, like just kind of constantly cycling through the same stuff. Like, oh man, Air Max 1s again, huh? Or like, we're going to call the Air Max 90 the Air Max 3. We're going to bring that name back after it's been the Air Max 90 now for like 20 years. All of a sudden it's like, oh no, this was the original name. Like, yeah, but it's been the Air Max 90 for God knows how long. Like, why are we confusing this? Why are we making it such a mess? Well, I look at kids wearing that stuff and I'm jealous. I'm like, damn, I could just get one pair of whatever the new Kyries are and be set. I kind of miss that.
That's definitely.
So this all got started because of Russ's Supremes. So let's spin this a different way. How about we all have a shoe, and I'll go first to give everybody a chance to think about it. What's a shoe that you made a happy memory in, or like where you made the memories of it, where it doesn't matter what shoe it was?
Probably these.
Nobody to start the whole conversation, but go ahead and tell it then, Russ. Like, why is that Supreme? Like, why is that your story?
Well, I mean, I've told this before. And Nick is probably sick of it because he probably heard it like in, at Complex and wherever else. But, it's like, and this is a new to me pair. I got these at round 2, like 3 years ago. They showed up. It was like a lightly worn. They're still very good. They were in the original box for like $500. And I went, I think a day later, because I couldn't go that day for whatever reason. And was like, oh, they're going to be gone. And they were still there. They were behind the counter. And, this is when people were spending double that for like Yeezy 350s. It's like, okay, you can do that. And now, I mean, I don't know what these would go for. I don't know what a very lightly worn pair of Supremes would go for, but I'm assuming it's a lot. And I mean, I'm going to wear them because I wanted them. But, the Supremes for me were one of those first shoes I remember hearing about on Nike Talk, knowing they were coming out. I had just started around that time even going to Supreme because I found out what it was. And I went for like a week straight until I could get a pair because they would sell a very few pairs a day. And I finally got a pair, brought them back to the Slam offices where I was then, put them on that day, and basically didn't take them off except to like go to bed for the next 5 years, maybe more. I still have my original pair. They're in the box, the receipt. They're killed. I mean, they're the most brutalized pair of sneakers I've ever kept. Like I wore those down the way I used to wear sneakers down when I was in like high school or junior high. But I mean, the reasoning behind that, like I definitely wanted Dunks even long before they even came back. It's like I missed out on them in 85, 86. So when like 99 came around, it was like, oh man, about time. And the whole elephant print thing was just something that wasn't on everything back then. It's like you look at it now and it's like Nike will put it on anything and everything. But for Supreme to do it back in 2001, like it was a super special thing. It was like, oh my God, when am I ever going to see this again? Retro was still so new. Re-retro wasn't a thing at all. SB was brand new. You know, and like I've said, it was a signifier back then. It was something where, like, if you wore that shoe around, people had to know what they were looking at. And if they knew what they were looking at, like, you were kind of part of it was almost like a secret society. I mean, sneakers was such a small thing. Not that sneakers was a small thing. I mean, obviously, like, Air Force Ones were everywhere. But it was like a subculture within a subculture. Which doesn't exist anymore.
I'm going to play devil's advocate just for a little bit. Can that feeling be repeated? You know, and I don't mean exactly repeated for the next generation, but I think of, like, you know, there's a lot of kids, for instance, like, just thinking about, like, some of Seth's designs, right? Like, if you go through the comments when Seth posts some of his, you know, the We Are Underdog shoes that he's done, like, there's a lot of young kind of, like, aspiring. I don't know that the kids even know that they want to be a designer, right? Like, I think that they just see what he's doing and think that's something cool. That's something I can aspire to do. And I wonder if those, you know, if those moments will ever, you know, it's hard to imagine, right? Because it's like Supreme and Elephant Print and, you know, Nike and Jordan, like, that's like, as, you know, to me, as peak as it could possibly get. But I also think that, like, you know, with all the creators that are out there doing cool shit, there's just people that, like, you know, that get into this and do other things and find interest in different nuances within the footwear world. And I'm thinking, like, is it possible for them to have that same kind of excitement? You know, let's say, I'll ask you this, Seth, the kids that are, like, seeing your work and your designs, can you recreate or, you know, get to that level of excitement when you don't have the massive brand behind it or the Supreme New York behind it or something? Because that's another piece of the conversation of, right, like, the diversity of shoes that people are into, and it ebbs and flows. It always does. Russ and I have talked about this a lot over the years, right? Like, sometimes, you know, a shoe, you'll see a shoe and you'll be like, that's just, like, phenomenal. I'm going to go get that. And, like, the rest of the world is not even paying attention, right? The rest of the world's over here buying, you know, take your pick, the 20 from Off-White, right? You're buying 20 pairs of Dunks now because it's Virgil Abloh. More power to you, but, like, there's a lot of other good shoes out there, in my opinion. So
you're buying that, Travis, like, Scott's Seltzer?
Yeah, yeah. Hey, you know, but is that something that you think, you know, just because the other part of this conversation for the next few days is, you know, very much going to be about, like, the people that are trying to, not even trying, that are creating their own communities within this kind of bigger, massive world that now exists around sneakers. And can that be, you know, that can your shoe, and I don't want to, like, say to compare your shoe to the Jordan 3, but, like, can your shoe be that for, like, the young kid that's looking up to you as a YouTube creator, that they're probably seeing more of you now than Russ or I was seeing MJ on WGN back in the day?
I don't know. It's interesting because, well, first of all, I feel like this, and I'm sorry, I've been running around. I'm trying to find a charger for my phone, so that's the reason I've been sort of running. I still haven't found one. Sorry about that. And then that's, if I randomly cut out, that's why. But the reason, I just with that particular shoe, I don't think so. I don't think that shoe has enough sort of. I don't know. It's not as. Let me put it this way. Looking at someone like Mosh, who's had this, like, amazing history of customizing sneakers for years, and then comes out with this beautiful shoe, I think he's got this history of being creative. And while I think YouTube is creative in its own way, I feel like it doesn't have the same sort of loyalty that, you know, that an artist that you really love would have. So for me, I don't think that at least this shoe with We Are Underdogs would ever sort of have that sort of following. I think there are, like, hardcore fans who, you know, might want to pick it up and might be like, oh, this is cool because Seth thought it. But I think that in a lot of ways, it's just, there's something about, I guess, just aspiring to be, like, the greatest. And Michael Jordan was the greatest. And so it's like, you know, there's something different between that and then, you know, the sort of small time social media. I think that as much as I would love to say, like, yeah, no, totally, realistically, I just don't think. I think people could use sort of, like, this shoe as a stepping stone and be like, well, if he could do it, I can do it myself. And that's what I really like about the whole process. But I think in the long term, I don't think this is that. At least my shoe is going to be something that people are going to look back on the way that they would look back on someone like, well, for example, someone I talked to even just recently, John Geiger. I really appreciate what he's doing. Whether you like his design or not, I think that he's killing it. And I think that that's someone that I really look up to as a designer and someone who's made their own path. And I think that's the sort of people that I think in the future people will be looking up to.
I think it's all just gotten so fragmented too. Sorry, I didn't mean to step on your feet there,
No.
John. But
No.
It's like we've gone from like there being, some sort of major release, like maybe once a month, maybe 2 pairs a month, depending on brands. And now it's like, I crack jokes about it. It's like, you look at the High Snob or Hypebeast post, like the 24 releases you need to know about this weekend. It's like, what? Like, how can you even hope to keep up with that? It's like, I remember when the first round of Dunk SBs came out, like the Mulders, the Genos, the Paul Browns, the Supas, there was a period where I was like, oh man, I'm going to get all the Dunk SBs. Like, I'm just going to buy all of them because whatever, there's like, there were like 8 in that initial release. And I think literally by the time the second season of them happened, it was like, oh shit, I'm in trouble. Like, I can't keep up with this. There's no way. So it's like, you bail on it. You look at like all those original Jordans. It's like the Jordan 3, there were 4 colorways in 88. Jordan had an MVP dunk contest, all-star MVP, defensive player of the year. There were 4. It's like Russell Westbrook gets 4 colorways when his shoe drops. There ends up being 50 colorways of some Westbrook shoe that no one even cares about. Sorry, Mike. And sorry, Russell Westbrook. I'm waiting for him to bust down my wall like the Kool-Aid man. It's like there just ends up being so much, and so much of it is noise. And so much of it is like, you have Jordan in particular, and maybe they're maybe they're still trying to sort of create whoever the next Jordan would be. But it's like you're doing it in a way that you never did with Jordan. And the whole reason Jordan stuff became as iconic as it did is because he didn't wear that much of it. It's like now you have LeBron over the course of a season wearing as many versions of his shoe as Jordan did between like his rookie year and like the first time he retired. How do you expect any of that really to be significant? Oh, he wore this in whatever game. Who cares? The whole point of that Jordan stuff is he wore it for a whole playoff series or a whole season. It's so hard now, I think, for any one shoe to have the impact that like shoes did back even 20 years ago, because there's just too many now.
What do you think
how is one supposed to stand out?
What do you think the last shoe that actually stood out was? Like,
I think there are some that maybe do break through the noise, and like, I don't own any of them, but I feel like when that first Travis Scott shoe dropped with the backwards swoosh, it was like, oh, that's interesting. That's kind of a cool way to play off of it. And now, of course, they're going to overdo it. I see that fragment thing where it's like, what are you doing? Like, what Reese's peanut butter cup of a shoe is that?
That's the shoe. That's the shoe of the year, Russ. It's already.
Oh God!
Come on.
Yeah.
I no longer look at like sneaker of the year stuff. I don't want to know.
It's already declared.
It was shoe of the year when the first like mock-up was made. Like 12 months ago, right? Shoe of the year for.
I see this question come up, and like, you know what? And like, I've kind of gone back and forth with this. The community's not the problem. The whatever community there is. And like, whether it's the 5 of us or like, pretty much I look at the community as anyone who you'd help out and not like charge whatever StockX prices are for something. If you have something someone else wants and you can afford to let them have it, you're going to. And that to me is what a community is. The problem to me is like, and I don't know if I can pinpoint when it happened, but the problem is when the brands realized that community existed and how they could exploit it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think a big thing for me was like the Red October Yeezy hit, right? And like to me, that was kind of a cool shoe. It's like, oh, an all red shoe, like you're kind of trying something different. And Nick, we were at Complex still, I think, when that happened. And
Yeah.
you know, I want to say like literally the next product season, there were like 900 all red shoes. You know, it got to a point where it's like a brand would put something out that would succeed, and then they would do like 500 other things exactly like it. Cause like, oh my God, this hit. So we need to duplicate this. And it's like, no, the reason that hit wasn't because it was all red. The reason it hit was because it was so different than anything else. So if you put out a bunch of things that are the same, like, yeah, you're gonna get some people to buy it who just like either didn't get whatever the original thing was, or, you know, maybe that triggered something in their head where like, oh, all red, like that's cool.
Yeah.
But like the thing to do was to do radically different things, not the same thing. And once all the brands started like following up, you know, and it all just turned into like, I don't know. I want to say clout chasing. It's kind of like that.
It really is. And it's kind of interesting. So there's two comments that popped up there. Kicks with V said it works into sustainability too. Releasing a sneaker every day of the week does not work towards sustainability. And I think that's one of the things that we are definitely going to talk about for the next, you know, few days. But the other was Travis Scott is the used Michael Jordan from Kwaku Riverson. And that is a really interesting take, because as much as like, I don't want to be struck down by lightning saying that, you know, an entertainer is going to be greater than Michael Jordan, or, you know, to me, Allen Iverson. Like, I do think that is absolutely true. I don't think that people understand, like, you know, if you find a 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old kid and play Travis Scott, it is the same kind of crazy energy that we would have had in, you know, watching MJ back in the day. And like, you know, we didn't have the ability to text our friends and be like, yo, did you see that dunk? Because that just didn't exist back then, right? We could have maybe done like boobs on the pager code or something. Like that would have been substitute for dunks. But like, we just didn't have that direct communication line with friends the way that everyone has now. And I think that's going to be really interesting to see how it progresses, because as much as like, I think you're 100% right, Russ, with the, you know, the brands taking that and running with it to a direction that, you know, is for, you know, nothing that appeals to me in a lot of ways. But also Travis Scott has the ability to kind of do all this on his own. He doesn't really need Nike, right? Like, he's the one that brings the energy in a sense.
Well, I'll also just say this, and I'll shut up for a little while because I realize I've been going on and on. But like, to me, like Jordan to Iverson to Travis Scott is kind of a straight line. You know, he's not a basketball player, but he's the 20-something-year-old that kids look up to, and the kids look at as sort of a style icon. And it was Jordan on the court. Then it became Iverson both on and off the court. And now Travis is, you know, obviously he doesn't have an on-court presence, but that stuff doesn't matter as much anymore. You know, I mean, like I said before, you see kids wearing current performance shoes, but in the grand scheme of things, like from a style perspective, like, yeah, I mean, I think Travis is like the new guy.
Yeah. So it's kind of impeccable timing. I'm actually going to bring on my friend Ben, who is a writer for Just Fresh Kicks, but he's very much like the younger generation. And I think he probably has a different perspective on all of this. Welcome, Ben, to this conversation. We got Robbie Falchi from Sneaker History, Russ Bengtson, Seth Fowler, John Ratner from Sneaker Dads. We're talking about Travis Scott. We're talking about kind of like where we're at in terms of like, there was a comment that was left that was basically saying that Travis Scott is the next generation's Michael Jordan. And I'm going to toss that to you, Ben, because you probably are closer to that than the rest of us in this conversation. What do you think about that?
Interesting. I think, wow.
He hangs up.
I think maybe like
No, it's like, well, Ben thinks I'm going to bounce so we get some more even playing here. So it's great talking, everybody. See you later.
Thanks,
Nice
Robbie.
Nice to meet you. Oh, wow. I think maybe if you want to go purely off of like impactful cultural moments, like what Travis Scott does, things that sort of go viral and things that Michael Jordan did that we're seeing around the world, maybe in that sense. But I don't know, like sneaker wise, because Travis only has what, like 6 shoes? I don't know.
And I mean, they're all
Like,
super limited too. You know,
Yeah,
obviously,
that's
like
true.
there's not a lot out there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think
Like absolutely
Kanye.
none of them you can go and you just get.
But it's like, man, people are talking about Mac attacks because he wore them. And like,
Yeah.
it's funny to me because the Mac attack is like, I've reached again, like this weird place in my life where it's like the Mac attack is one of my favorite Nikes ever. And I hope to God it never gets retroed because I think they'll just ruin it. You know, there'll be a South Beach version of it and I'll just literally like drive a car through a Foot Locker. But
Wait, to get a pair or for other reasons?
no, for other reasons.
Okay.
And the car's in the shop right now, so like it would be a shame to ruin it so fast. But you know, it's like when I saw him wearing them, my first thought is like, okay, who's his like stylist? Like who hooked him up with those? Like, I don't think Travis Scott is so deep into Nikes that, you know, he knows about a John McEnroe shoe from like 1983 or
Yeah,
84.
I don't think so either. And I was kind of thinking about that shoe last year because there was those new lines that Nike did, like N.354. There was a shoe where they kind of did an ode to the Mac attack where they used the same mud guard with the two sort of spikes for the bottom face board. And that really stuck out to me. It was like, oh, that's the Mac attack. Are they going to do something with that? Never did anything of it. And I, you know, whatever, I brushed it off. But then Travis Scott is wearing them. And I'm thinking about him again. It's kind of weird because if the demand is there, Nike would probably do it.
And LeBron wore a pair.
Yeah,
Someone got LeBron a pair, and I don't know where he found a pair of size 16s that could hold up, but
so it sounds like they might
Someone had
roll them out if
Yeah,
they're
that
giving
makes
him.
me think.
If LeBron and Travis Scott are finding pristine pairs to wear,
I mean, it
like
wouldn't
it
surprise
sounds
me
like
if
they
it came
might.
back.
Yeah, it sounds like they might do it just for fun.
Well, so
But-
that's an interesting kind of different direction, though, right? Is like, I think like one of the things that I love about sneakers, and I know Russ would agree to this to a certain extent at some point or another, the chase and the hunt and just like the exploring, trying to find interesting shoes is something that I will never get tired of. I don't even intentionally go looking for sneakers, yet I find myself wandering through, you know, the back hash wall of a Nike store or potentially a Ross or a Marshalls or Nordstrom Rack or all those places where it's like I think you posted about it, Russ. Like it might have been 10 years ago because it's been COVID, but like you posted something where you found maybe a Joakim Noah PE or somebody's like Nuggets PE at a Ross for $30, and like those are the things that I absolutely love because it like kind of throws me back into this like, oh shit, this is what I really enjoyed about this, right?
It was the Manimal. What the hell?
Yeah,
what the hell is his
yeah.
name? I'm spacing on his name. He's out of the NBA now. He's like 31.
I wonder
But
what's
whatever,
going to be
yeah.
like in 10 years. You know, there's going to be so many sneakers out there in the world. There's going to be all the old Dunks that didn't fall apart and the Jordan 1s and the Soul Swapped Air Max. And then it's going to be the millions and millions of shoes that have come out in the last 20 years. They're just like overproducing. Like, what's it going to look like when you're hunting? And I think that art of hunting might be gone because it's just going to be too much. It's going to be platforms, and you know, maybe GOAT's going to be exclusively used sneakers, and there'll be some kind of formula to grade a used sneaker that's like PSA for cards. But it's hard to imagine that that art and that hunt is going to be there forever because, you know, platforms like eBay now, they're obviously after the new sneaker. This new sneaker money. They're not after that used money. There's way more money in the new market, right? You could see it with their strategy now.
Well, it also makes you wonder what happens when, you know, a generation of kids who thought like it's no big deal to pile up 100, 200, 400 pairs of shoes all of a sudden decide like, yeah, I don't really need these anymore, and like a ton of those collections flood the secondary market. What does that do? That's what I always think is hilarious about StockX. Like, they've done an amazing job and obviously like have gotten valued super high, but you can call sneakers stocks all you want, but they're not stocks. Like, this valuation like isn't based on anything other than how much is a rich person willing to spend on a pair of these. And the second they're not, like, there is no intrinsic value in a pair of Yeezys. It's like if you spent $1,500 on a pair of 350s 2 years ago, now, like, what are they going for now? There's no fewer of them, like there's no fewer produced of like a first year pair, but they're not worth as much because no one, does anyone care about 700s anymore? Not 700s. What was the first pair with the Velcro?
750s.
750s. Does anyone care about those anymore at all? Like, do those have cultural cachet right now? I mean, maybe they will again in 10 years. But I feel like people who chase those so hard, like, what are they worth now? Are they going to have their SB moment where all of a sudden they're worth tons of money? Our SB is going to keep going up. Like, people are spending what, 20 grand for a pair of freaking pigeons? Like, are you insane?
Yeah,
I think that's when the bubble will
but that's
pop
what I'm
when
saying, like,
those resellers will have 400 pairs. Something will do. I thought it was going to be COVID and an economic thing, but obviously that hasn't happened yet. It could be a cultural moment. It could be, some kind of anti-consumption wave. I don't see that happening anytime soon. But the idea you talked about keeping up and the unavoidable failure to keep up, that it's just impossible to keep up. And jumping back to what Seth was talking about with his shoes, and young people want to create, and they see someone like Seth doing something on their own, and they may rebel and say, you know what, I want to do this myself. I want to come up with my own brand. We saw a ton of that during COVID. We're seeing that now and saying, you know what, I can design my own shoes. I don't need 100 pairs. And maybe that's just a small piece of it, but yeah, the sustainability of this bubble, I don't see it. I don't see it lasting.
I think you're also going to get another generation of kids to find out that the polyurethane midsole Nikes fall apart, which is always a fun thing to discover. I personally remember seeing like photos on Nike Talk, and I'm going to mention Nike Talk a lot because they were obviously significant, but in like 2004, 2005, someone posted like their 99 5s falling apart. Yeah. And like, I swear to God, that same weekend, I filled a duffel bag with all my 99 2000 retros and brought them to Flight Club on Green Street. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to be sitting on these when they fall apart. Let someone else have that.
People still buy them. People still buy these shoes.
That was back when they sold used stuff too.
It's wild to see a shoe that if anyone wore would fall apart, and people are paying thousands of dollars. I don't know if they know or they just have nostalgia or it's a commodity. But
I have stuff that's falling apart. I have original 80s and 90s stuff that are falling apart, and those I probably won't get rid of. Although at one point I did throw out a pair of like Air Force Max CBs that I'd worn a couple times, and then they just broke. And it's like, what am I keeping these for? Now there are interesting things you can do with shoes like that. That Rico Tour brand in Japan, who like resoles shoes with Vibram soles and all sorts of crazy stuff. I see there's a place in LA that does that now. I have a few pairs I've been hanging on to do that with. I have a pair of like Safari retros that I think would be rather interesting with like a Vibram ripple bottom. But that's the difference too. That's why they're not, your stocks don't fall apart in 10 years. Your shoes might.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, like another piece to this is really interesting, right? Like this is kind of like where, like Seth brought up Dan Mosh customs, right? And like that whole world of customs is also evolving into a more mainstream thing, right? Where people are able to do this stuff in ways that, that you just couldn't even fathom 10 years ago, right? Like people can have, you can go find whatever you want and have it put together by a lot of good people on the internet, you know, that you already know. But the other thing, something that John mentioned, or both you and John mentioned, Russ, was, you know, this, like, if there's like an anti, you know, an anti-sneaker movement of some sort. And I think we talked about this on the Sneaker History podcast. Might have been Rohit, might be able to answer that. But like, there was a I don't know if it still exists because I haven't seen humans outside of just looking out the window here. But like, I would say like 2 years ago when I was living in LA, you know, my girlfriend Cam worked for Glossier, which is like a very young beauty brand, like right there on Melrose, very like just poppin' energy, right? Everybody wanted to be there, lines longer than Supreme every day of the week, not just on Thursdays. It was a crazy experience for me because seeing all of the young kids that would go into that store wearing completely insanely dirty, beat white on white Air Force Ones. Like, if there was a counterbalance to the people that are buying 20 pairs of Off-Whites, that would be it, because they're literally buying one pair of shoes and they want them to look as worn as they possibly can. And I wonder if like that's if that will be something that happens in the future, where we start seeing even more of people. I think of like what were the shoes? It was like either late 80s, early 90s, New York City there was a particular, it's not Doc Martens, but something like that, right? That was just massively popular, and it started an entire trend like around the world, but like everyone was wearing them. And it was also right in this era of like, you know, the early Jordan era, obviously a lot of stuff from Nike and Adidas in the late, you know, 80s and early 90s too. But could that be a way that like we get beyond kind of this, like, you know, this StockX cyclical market approach? You know, is that something that's I don't know, is like it's I'm not connecting the dots in my head to speak this thought, I guess, but that's kind of all the things that I'm thinking about, and I'm just throwing it out to you guys.
I mean, you had the brown shoe thing happen for a while, right? You know, you had like, even like, I don't even know, like the Funkmaster Flex lugs, you know, stuff that would get made fun of, but like, obviously that stuff made money. You know, it's like, I remember when I was at Slam, like lugs was advertising, you know, people were obviously buying that stuff. You know, and you had little stuff bubble up, whether it was Clark's or like, you know, I even look at, I don't know how many years ago this would have been now, but like, you know, common projects. Like there was a brief period when like all of a sudden, like this basic ass, like plain white designer shoe, like everyone had to have that. You know, not everyone, because again, like the money was a little much. But now I feel like that stuff could hit harder if it did hit, because who's going to blink at paying like $250, $300 for a pair of like Italian or Portugal made, you know, designer shoes when people are spending that much on Jordan 1s regularly? Jordan 1 mids are selling for $300. Like that's not really a barrier anymore. So, I don't know. I mean, I guess again, like taste is fickle. Who knows what could happen? You know, if I'm Common Projects, I'm sending like boxes of those to Travis. Here, try these, dude.
So I'm gonna kind of ask this to Ben and a little bit to Seth too, because one, I think that like Seth has a little bit more of an understanding on like actually making those shoes and the higher quality that the craftsmanship that goes into it. But I know just from like being friends with Ben for a few years now, like he is definitely more, I would say, more interested in not having all the same shoes as everyone that a lot of the people that you see on the internet. Like he wears interesting things, and that's one of the things that I think is like I like following people on social that do interesting things, right? Like at the end of the day, like I want to connect with everybody that wants to talk about sneakers, but I definitely get more personal joy out of seeing somebody wear something that I don't expect or making their own shoe. So maybe that's just like the next evolution of all this is like, you know, we're all going to wear Common Projects and erase everything we've done for the last 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like it is definitely sort of a choice that I make to wear something interesting that I don't see. Like I got Russ, I got those Bodega Footscape Nike
Oh,
Logan
right.
shoes from you.
Yeah.
And I've been wearing those a lot, and that's something that stands out to a lot of people these days because Nike hasn't done something like that in a while. It hasn't been seen. And so when I wear it, it definitely, like, even sneaker people are like, wait, what is that? Is that recent? And it's like, no, it's not. And you kind of have to explain. But I do think that there is sort of this like chase to be exclusive, but to also have people know what it is because you want to stand out. But like at the same time, if you're someone on Instagram that is trying to get likes, then you want to stand out, but you want everybody to know why you're standing out. And so it's just kind of, I don't know about like breaking the StockX cycle, like you were saying, Nick, but I think that the more I've been thinking, like the more that I see shoes kind of integrated into like social media and every day, sort of like you have, you know, the accounts that talk about like what's the tunnel fits, where they talk about the sneakers and what they're wearing just on their way into the stadium. Like as that becomes more regular, then people kind of are going to associate shoes more with like real status, I think, which is kind of a problem in my opinion. But it depends on, I think, whether the sort of shoes, like exclusive sneakers, like Nike stuff, remains what's popular for a while, because it's always it could just be something else in a few years.
I mean, StockX and Stadium and all those places have a billion reasons to maintain the status quo. So
yeah.
You know, it's going to be hard to knock that out.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny though, you talk about buying different stuff, and like Nick, I know you remember, like back when you were at Complex, I would drag you off to Paragon, you know, and it's like, again, instead of going to a boutique and looking for whatever the latest collab is, I still have pairs of Babolat tennis shoes because no one was wearing those. You know, it was like a Andy Roddick tennis shoe that had the Michelin Man on the back of the outsole, and it's like, you knew if you wear that, people are going to be like, "What? I don't even know what brand that is." You know, but it's true. It's like Ben said. Like I feel like the point we're at now is like people want to be different by wearing something that's very recognizable, and it's like you're just taking advantage of the fact that a million people are trying to buy the same 1,000 pair release, which is what makes sneakers and you name it apps completely unusable. You know, again, like to go back to the Supreme thing, it's like, I don't know if any of you guys tried to buy a pair of those Supreme Dunks when they released a week ago or whatever, but like it was a joke. It went from page not loading to page loaded and sold out in like 2 seconds. It was like, all right, that was fun. You know, and then you see like, and I'm not even going to name names, but like certain people who I surprised I haven't muted on Instagram, it's like posting the whole set. Like, oh, I got sent these. Great. I don't even care. I can't buy it. Like, I don't understand. Like, it's reached the point where like, I don't understand the whole influencer thing anymore, because it's like you're showing stuff off, not even to get people to buy it, because they can't buy it. Like what's the purpose of it anymore? It's literally just showing off, which is like part of why I stopped posting stuff on Instagram to begin with, other than selling stuff, you know, and posting stuff in a story where it'll be there for 24 hours and then gone. Like, I don't understand that anymore. Like, what's the point of posting something that's already sold out? What are you influencing to me to go buy it for $800 on StockX? Nah.
StockX pays influencers to do that though. And like you said with lugs, like if they're paying for advertising, it probably works in some manner. When you see the influencers and they say like, look at this Travis Scott Jordan 1 that I have, and it's got the StockX tag on it. It's just like, are you serious? Is someone really going to go pay? What is it? 1,600? I don't know.
Right.
Like, is someone seriously going to do that? But it's like, oh, my favorite influencer. I don't know. Do people have favorite influencers? Like they have it. Like I need to go get it. And I guess, I don't know, maybe I'll get likes like them. There's little kids and they get the credit card and
Well, that's the fun part too, right? You get like the Supreme email that the store is updated at like 11:05, by which
Yeah.
point any of this stuff is sold out. And then at 11:15, you get the StockX email being like, come buy these here. And like,
Yeah.
they're basically
Yeah.
just like, they're just preying on the people who like were super psyched up to get this shoe and couldn't. So it's like, maybe in the moment that person will drop $800 on it. Cause it's like, man, the whole reason I got up early on this Thursday morning, early at 11 o'clock, is to buy this shoe. And like, I'm still in that mindset where it's like, God damn it. Like, I really want these. So it's like, at that point, maybe you will drop that 800 on your credit card just to get them. You'll still get them at the same time. You're still in the first wave,
See, I can't relate to
Yeah,
that
I
at
mean-
all. Like it just doesn't add up to, like, I've probably spent more than retail on 2 or 3 shoes over the last 30 years. And those are shoes that I literally waited on, like you guys probably know the Nike Town San Francisco Air Max 90, right? Look at how I'm dressed. Like I needed to have that shoe. It's been like a solid 10 years of trying to get it. And I finally paid like $400 for them, which is half of what most people were asking for. So I felt like it was a deal, but like, it was just an important piece for me to have as like a, just nostalgia for me. Right. I always just wanted that. But I think on the flip side of it is really interesting, right? Because like guys like Seth are able to like do this stuff to support their own brands now, where like you could not have done that. I mean, even just like 7-8 years ago, like people would have just, I mean, we know brands that people tried to start 7 or 8 years ago without Instagram, without, Twitter, without the machine that exists now, that are no longer there, right? There's people that have gone on to create, like I think of like, what was the Gourmet, right? Like Gourmet, John Buscemi started Gourmet kind of as a like knockoff of Jordan's in a sense, but like obviously that brand kind of to like one of the questions in the chat, like shifts into this weird space of like, is there, like an issue with people ripping things off? Because I think of like some of my favorite skate shoes and all of them are ripoffs of Jordans, right? Like, like all of them had those designs. And I think too, like a lot of the people that are creating their own things and, like can't speak to like what Seth is doing, but like, it seems like you're always going to use those influences and those interests, right? Like, I mean, I just feel like at the end of the day, like if Seth shows up with an Iverson jersey on his wall, he and I can be friends, right? Like, and like, I'll buy a pair of shoes from him. Maybe my values don't align with like the current market, but like that would be something that like actually matters to me.
But I think to go back to that, the StockX email right after something sells out, it's like if I'm a sneaker YouTuber or an Instagram quote unquote influencer, and God forbid, I mean, I'm too old anyway, but with like say 100,000 followers, maybe I will spend that $800 to get that shoe, to get it right when it released, to be able to show it off on my Instagram or on my YouTube channel. And I don't have to say I bought it for $800, but that $800 investment is worth having it the weekend it dropped or the week it dropped. That's like literally an investment in your business. So it's like
Seth and I have actually talked about that. And I think that's a great point, right?
Definitely. And it's one of those things, it's what has kind of made me, I guess, just dismayed with I guess just influencers and especially sneaker influencers in general, and the fact that I'm a part of it. It's a love-hate relationship. It's one of those things where, because this is my business and because this is my job, I love sneakers and I've always loved sneakers, but there's frustratingly a side that really has to be business minded in order to feed my family and that sort of thing. So in that case, it's like I'm ending up buying a lot of retail or resale pairs early. For example, I bought the I don't know where it is, but I'll hear this. the 450s. It's a wild shoe. I mean, personally, I like it because I like how crazy of a design it is, but I paid way too much for the shoe. I never would have honestly probably even thought to buy it if I wasn't doing it. But at the end of the day, what sort of feeds my addiction to design and putting out content that I really want to make is sort of the bread and butter stuff. It's the reviews of the shoes that I might not personally love, but people are looking for. And I think that as much as I think that people think that like sneaker YouTube drives people's decision making, and in a way I think it does. I think it's really we're following the really high trendsetters like the Travis Scotts who are setting the trends. The kids are wanting to see what Travis Scott has, and then we're kind of like, oh, that's what they want to see. Okay, so we'll spend the money and do that. And it's kind of I hate it because of how consumerist it is. But at the same time, it gives us the opportunity. And I think if you look at a lot of just influencers in general, it gives them the opportunity to be creative in their own way, whether that's, showing off a product in a new way or creating their own products or just having opportunities to, for example, my favorite thing about this in general is just being able to meet people, like being able to meet you guys, people who I've looked up to in the industry for years. And now that I have a platform, I can actually have that opportunity to be like, holy shit, what's up, guys? Like, I've been following you guys forever, so it's that sort of thing. And I think there's a lot to it, but it's for me, it's a real love-hate relationship.
Hey, thanks for letting me jump on. I'm gonna go bid on some bacons, guys.
Thanks, Sean. Have a good night.
Yeah, I mean, I think that getting sneakers early and stuff. If you're gonna like make videos and stuff, it definitely furthers your income. It affects the earlier you have it, the faster you can make the video and stuff. More people are gonna see it, obviously. But I know people my age, I'm 24, who are they've kind of resigned themselves to paying resale on most shoes, and they go after most shoes. And so like I know people that are amassing, hundreds of pairs of shoes for no reason, but they're every time they take an L on sneakers, it's just like, well, StockX, I want them next week anyways. So, and they just do it, which is it's like, crazy, but
yeah.
Yeah,
it's like it's funny. Like for me, I don't know if this works for you, Nick, but I think back when I used to get shoes on a regular basis, like getting them sent to me and getting seeded pairs, I tended to buy more because it's like there was something you wouldn't get, and you were like, oh man, like, well, I got these 3 other pairs for free this week, so it's no big deal if I buy this one pair now. And like now that I basically hardly get anything, like I'll get a pair once very rarely sent to me, like I don't look to buy anything anymore. Over the past, and I stopped for a while because it got too cold and snowy and everything else, but I probably got rid of 150 pairs in like a 2-month span. I sold off a bunch of stuff. I left stuff around here, like occasionally leaving clues on my IG, but I think one dude like actually picked up like 4 or 5 pairs in a row. And I'm like, all right, dude, I'm not trying to fill your closet. So I'm just going to leave stuff out and not even mention it. And just leave a note in the shoe or in the box. I've stacked up some more pairs I need to do that with. And it's just like, I don't even notice they're gone. It's like, and it's some of them were pairs I held on to for like a decade and either never wore or maybe wore once and then put away. And it's just like, wait a minute, why am I keeping all this stuff? And I think it's sort of natural to go from that to being like, wait, so why am I buying new stuff? Like I have stuff I've kept that I haven't gotten to yet that I thought I really wanted. So like, why would I even pile more on top of that? And I think some of that's being old and some of it's just having been into it for so long, that it all starts to cycle back. But, I think some of it is too, like, and I keep circling back to those Supremes where it's like, you look at a certain shoe that hit you a certain way when you got it. And you realize like the next like 1,000 pairs you got or a couple hundred pairs, you were just looking to like capture that same feeling again. And like, maybe none of them did that. And it's like, okay, so why don't I just stop chasing this? Cause I'm not going to catch it.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So Seth, as you've been making your own stuff, does that feeling of like, to Russ's Supreme conversation, right? does that actually, do you get that feeling in making your own shoes? Like when you get to make your own shoe, I'm totally assuming, but I would assume that like you get to make your own shoe and like assuming it comes out, in the 80 to 90% of what you wanted, you basically want to wear it all the time, right?
Yeah, totally. It feels like something, and that's something that that I think it's one of those feelings that you really don't get unless, like, I don't know, like I don't get the same feeling wearing any other pair of sneakers. You know what I mean? And it's no matter how the sneaker looks. Like even for example, like years ago, I went to an event at I think it was Ubik in Philly where they were taking apart like soles or like cup soles from certain Adidas sneakers and putting them on others, and you could pick like the upper and the sole. And even just that event where I got to choose like which part of the shoe is going on which other shoe, like that made it personal for me, and that made it a lot more interesting to me than just going out and buying the latest 3 or the latest 4 or whatever, just because it was like something that I felt like, even though I hadn't created it, it felt like it was my own personal thing that no one else had. And that's something that has been really exciting, especially when designing your own sneakers. And that's something that I think in the future is like you've been sort of alluding to, is that I think more people are going to have that opportunity, and more people are giving people a chance to create their own things. For example, you've got companies like Garrison in Philly, or like We Are Underdogs in Portugal, who like if you want, you can reach out to them and you might be able to create a shoe of your own. And that's really where it gets exciting for me. Definitely.
So I just brought on my friend Will Hardison. Going to take it back because Will has been doing the Nike Talk thing for, I don't know. He was there from the very get-go with Nike Talk. So Russ and Will probably already have had conversations through various screen name and pseudonyms. But what's going on, Will?
What's up, fellas? December 24th, 1999 was my join date.
That's
crazy.
I got to leave, but it was a pleasure. Thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for hopping on, Seth.
I'll be watching in a little bit. See you guys later. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think that one of the things that you talked about, Russ, like going and going into some place like Paragon or any of those mom and pop places out on Long Island, right, where you're just like, I think I told you about it, but like when I was living out there, I like just wandered around and ended up walking into some old tennis store, and there's a pile of LeBron 2s and 3s in the basement on a discount table, right, and just like kind of losing my mind because wait, this still happens? I mean, this is a solid 8 to 10 years after those shoes came out, right? And like they're still sitting here. But I think that's kind of an interesting piece, right? Like we're kind of in this new era of like people have the option. It's almost like you have too many options, right? Like, I think back in, let's say, like thinking about like the 99 2000, right, you have like all of the player exclusives. Like Will came across a ton of those player exclusives, has some legendary photos of him in all these shoes, and I think those types of things were always like the underlying drive, where like now the elusiveness is literally just like a dollar amount, right? Like if you don't have the $800 to pay resale for Supreme Dunks, what like you're just not getting them, I guess. And that's a really interesting kind of place to be in, because if I'm spending $800, I mean $800, I can make my own shoe. Like there's people that'll put together a shoe for you for that much, and it'll be really nice, right? So are we just like, because we're so broadly, sneakers is so broad and so many people are into it and like all over the place, that we're just always going to have these, like, we're like basically on an 8-lane freeway collectively now, instead of just like the 2-lane back road that all of us used to kind of enjoy being, oh, hey, wave to the neighbors because we recognize that person has an interesting pair of shoes on. And now, like, I don't know, maybe we just don't even have the option to see the people on these roads.
I don't know, because I mean, like I'm a little young to sort of speak on how it used to be, but I think that it's even in like I would consider 8 or so years that I've been like chasing after shoes, and like following and stuff. But I think it's grown tremendously from like what it used to be, and people like high school kids are going crazy. And like for me in high school, and like most people that I knew in other high schools around me, it was just kind of like me and a few other people, and like that was it. Maybe like 3 other kids in your school, and you could all kind of like hang out and talk about shoes together. But in the time since, it seems like I have, you know, younger cousins, and they talk to me about my shoes, and they had like what you would not, you know, you're not this kind of person. I don't know. I don't want to put people in a box, but you know, like you're kind of nerdy. Like, what's going on here? But it's interesting, like how much even in my sort of lifetime, I've seen it change, and it's definitely sort of the barrier for entry is, I think, like it's definitely for the exclusive stuff very high, but for anything else, like Nike makes so many different shoes, and so many of them are just like slight offshoots of like whatever's popular, and like if you can just go get that, you know, that's all it takes.
I was gonna say, like, sneakers now just has like this crazy long tail where it's like, and it's like 2 different ways. It's like if you're into sneakers generally, like if you're just into shoes for shoes, now is an incredible time to be into them, because everything that's ever been made is available pretty easily. You know, it's like,
yeah, that's true.
If you look at like the actual stock that a Stadium Goods or a Flight Club has, like it's insane. I mean, it covers like the last 20 years, basically inclusive, like anything that's come out during that period you can find without even having to look that hard. You know, you can build up an incredible rotation right now. I mean, I haven't looked in a while, but I guarantee it. If you just go on like or Bodega and go through their sale section, you can have like a dozen incredible shoes to wear every day and not pay retail for a single pair.
Yeah.
You know? And the problem comes around is if you are into sneakers, just into having whatever the current absolute hottest shoe is, yeah, then now sucks, because you're competing against millions of other people for that specific shoe that there aren't that many of. And yes, you can get it, but you're going to pay a lot of money to have it. And like, if that's what's important, sorry, like things aren't going to be much fun.
True. So I want to have everybody answer this, but I'm going to toss it to Rohit first, because he's up there in Portland. So maybe he's getting a little more interesting stuff. But what was the last shoe you guys like saw somebody wearing that just kind of surprised you, or you thought was interesting? Because like for me, it's never going to be like the stuff that Russ is talking about that's you know, come out, you know, and is $800 on you know, eBay or whatever.
For me, it was, we were at the Nike employee store and somebody had a pair of Kobe 7, the Christmas holiday edition with the purple and green. And I was just like, I have this sneaker, and this kid who is probably anywhere from 8 to 10 years younger than I was, he had it, and it had battle scars on it, which is something I appreciated, because I think, to something Russ has kind of alluded to, if you're a clout chasing kid and you're just going after this because the guy you follow or girl you follow on Instagram has it, and you want to be part of that, and you want that wave of jubilation and admiration, it's going to be a very frustrating process. But the fact that this sneaker had scars on it, to me, almost made me cry tears of joy, because I'm like, okay, this kid gets it. As absurd as that sounds. But I've also had this scenario where I used to be a Nike intern, and one of our going away gifts for the summer was we got to make our own pair of IDs, and this was in 2007. So I'd made what I call the Ninja Turtle Dunk. I wore this, I'd say 2 weeks ago. Somebody stops me and goes, "Where did you get those? I'm a dunk guy, but I've never seen this." And I had to break it to him like, no, I'm not some exclusive person or whatever. We're just really creative in the summer of 2007. But those are the moments that you as a sneakerhead now kind of have to trade off of, because to Russ's point, to Ben's point, to Seth's point, it sucks to be a sneakerhead right now if you're just doing it for the wrong reasons. So,
yeah. So I always think of like the geography aspects of this too, right? Like Russ and I talked about this when I first moved to New York, you know, when we were walking around getting coffee, because I just was blown away that so many people were wearing sneakers. And, you know, so to toss that question to you, Will, as somebody who lives in North Carolina, and like clearly you're representing with the Carolina blue tee already. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but like you being around all of the UNC stuff, do you see more of that? Is that like what's the latest shoe that you've seen where you were like actually surprised to see it, or just, you know, thought it was interesting that somebody was wearing it?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly enough guys around here that know, you know, the manager of the football team for UNC or basketball team, and those are kind of getting, you know, out the back door. I wouldn't say that you come across that a ton, but there's certainly, like, I mean, Raleigh in itself. So, I mean, I live 30 minutes from Chapel Hill, and, you know, I mean, we've got 2 or 3, like, you know, buy, sell, trade type of stores. And I've been impressed with just the scene in general here growing over the past 5 years that I've lived here. And, you know, for me, like, yeah, I honestly don't see a ton of like, holy crap, that dude's got this sneaker on, right? It's more like I'm taken back by just like people that honestly, like, I was shopping in the mall a year ago and guy had on the teal and green like Presto Reacts, and I was like, okay, like, that's a cool shoe, and it's a funny and, you know, funky color that like generally like most people, sneakerheads quote unquote, would be like, yeah, I'm good on that. But I was like, man, that looks like a cool shoe and comfortable, and I went home and purchased, you know, that shoe. So he influenced me just by like, man, that's a cool shoe. Like, it's really cool design. It's not something that you would see every day, and it's by far the most comfortable shoe I've ever put on.
So I guess like this is something that I think I've probably talked about on our podcast, but, you know, you guys probably think about this too. Do you think that like our perception of what people are actually wearing is, you know, like overly influenced by Instagram? Because I see all sorts of crazy shit on Instagram, but I don't think I've ever seen, unless I was at a, you know, a sneaker con or something, I don't think I've seen somebody that I didn't know wearing Supreme Dunks. So like, are like, you know, thinking about your Supreme Dunks and your stories with that, Russ, like, like, when was the last time you saw somebody wearing a pair of Supreme Dunks? You know, I mean, I guess like taking the last year out of the equation.
I don't know. I mean, it's weird for me, I feel like, and you know, you've been in the same situation where it's like you get used to going to sneaker events, and it's like at that point everyone is trying to like kind of flex on everyone else, or, you know, at least wear something they haven't worn before. So it's like, you know, the last time I probably saw Supreme Dunks was at like the release party for the Dunk SB book, you know, where it's like everyone is pulling out something. And honestly, at that point, like, you could probably like separate yourself even more if you wore a pair of like Foot Action, like, you know, patent Dunks from 2001 instead. Cause like at that point, Supremes are boring. You know, it's like maybe they only made like 2,400 pairs of lows or whatever, but like sometimes I feel like 2,200 of those are in the city being worn by people at this point. It's like, it's not that different. You know, so I think those, I guess, sneaker events were kind of the pre-Instagram, where it's like,
yeah,
you just got used to like people wearing absolutely wild shit. So it's like, okay, this is normal. You know, and you'd have to go a little further afield. And that's where I do get into like, oh, I'm going to buy this, whatever this pair is that's on sale, because that means fewer people actually bought it. You know, it's like, rather than some 1,000 pair collab that literally everyone who bought it is trying to flex in them, you know, you're almost better off at that point buying a pair of, you know, Presto Reacts, because like those are going to be more uncommon. Yeah. Certainly in like an environment where everyone is like overthinking it and being like, what super rare thing can I wear? You know, and I don't know. I mean, at this point, you can still make people like do a double take. But I think the way to do that maybe is through like either vintage stuff or things that people aren't thinking of as much anymore. I remember like, it's funny because when you first asked, like, when was the last time you saw something that really like blew your mind? And I'm like, damn, I don't even remember the last time. But I know like one of my trips to Malaysia, we were in like a mall in Kuala Lumpur and I saw a kid wearing a pair of mismatched Kobe's. It was like one yellow and one purple. And I was like, what the? And apparently that was a pair you could buy mismatched. I forget what number it was, but I had kind of, I guess, not paid attention to that particular release. But just someone wearing a pair of mismatched shoes in public was just like, whoa, that's kind of crazy. And now it's like, you know, it's funny. Like now I see people wearing mismatched pairs in the NBA and it's boring.
Yeah,
everyone's doing it now.
The same thing. Yep.
The NBA has become like a sneaker event. You know, it's like, I never thought I would say this. I never want to see a pair of Grinch Kobe's again. I'm sick of them. The whole thing was, that was such a rad shoe because Kobe wore them on Christmas Day and it was a green shoe with a Laker uniform. And that was insane.
Yep.
And now literally every time I turn my TV on to an NBA game, someone's wearing them. They're not special anymore. They're just kind of like, ugh. It's just like NBA players are sneaker clout chasing. Like it's super depressing.
Yeah, it is really kind of interesting how everything is kind of, the tables have kind of turned on everything. But I guess, Ben, like I'm going to throw that same question to you as somebody who's in San Francisco, in the city a lot. Like, do you see, I mean, you're right around some of the, I would say some of the most popular sneaker stores in San Francisco even. Do you see
definitely.
like a lot of the same stuff? What's the last thing that you saw that was actually made you think, oh, that's
I
interesting?
mean, like, I would say because of, you know, the last year or so, I've been mostly in like a warehouse setting. And so me and my coworkers, like most of them are sort of sneakerheads as well. And some of them have been doing this for a while. I'm one of the younger ones in the company, and they'll break out some stuff that's pretty interesting. Like one of them had, speaking of local boutiques, he had the Recon Nort Dunk High from, I don't know the year, but like the Alcatraz inspired black and white, like ostrich leather, which was a really cool, like you don't really even see it in the Bay Area that much among sneakerheads that are supposedly, you know, very familiar. But to see him pull it out was like pretty cool. But I used to work like, in a retail store on Valencia, like right in the Mission. And so a lot of people coming by in kind of crazy stuff. And then you see a lot of like Allbirds and a lot of basic things, but just a lot of Yeezys too. So nothing like at a certain point, everything was just kind of like, oh, like you're wearing sneakers. Like, okay. Because you can never really tell. Some people will come in and you'll ask them about their shoes the first few times, and then they're kind of like, "Huh, what?" And then they don't really understand like that what you're like kind of trying to ask about, and they just kind of keep it moving, and you get it after the first like 10 people. So
that's actually makes me want to ask another question. So not necessarily Allbirds, but just thinking about all of these kind of like smaller startup footwear brands, right? There's so many of them now, and there's a lot of them doing like what I think is really cool stuff in terms of like, you know, making product that's recyclable and just things that are better for us than I bought these 1,000 shoes. Not only am I buried in them, but the world is going to die sooner because I bought them. So like, is there a place and you know, where that consumer that is, you know, making a conscious decision to wear a shoe that is, you know, fully recyclable or sustainable, and the consumer that's, you know, excited about these Virgil Off-White the 20 dunks, like crosses? Like, are there are these just going to be two separate groups of people for the future?
I mean, my thoughts on like all the sustainability stuff is that they've all like Nike, Adidas, they've all, I mean, I guess it's really just the two of them so far, have announced, we're going to have this much recycled material in every product by 2025 or whatever. And I think it's just on them to do it and find a way to integrate it into like the materials that Virgil has to pick out from. Like, just make all your materials recyclable, and then that's kind of the only option. And once they sort of like it, because you can't really tell the difference with some of these things either. Like, if you just do it, the everyday consumer is not going to be able to tell the difference. Like, they can't really tell the difference of leather quality as it is. So like, how are they going to know? And some of this recycled leather is like pretty nice stuff. So I think it's just kind of on the brands to sneak it in there. Just to also be better as a company. Design is should be efficient and environmentally friendly. But I don't think that there's ever going to be like a true sort of crossover where the person that wants all 20 or like supposedly 50 now or some ridiculous number of like off-white dunks is going to like chase down everyone because it's like environmentally friendly, because really the only environmentally friendly option is to stop making all these like stupid limited runs of shoes that like probably make all this excess material and rubber and waste. Like, if you really want to like start, my big thing is, if you really want to like, don't start a whole sneaker brand and start making a bunch of more shoes just to like say that the materials are environmentally friendly. Like, what about all the production you did? Just go, if you have an idea, go to a brand, like an existing brand, and say, hey, integrate this into your production line, and you'll be more.
Yeah, that's go ahead, Russ.
No, I was just gonna say, like, and I'm gonna duck out pretty soon myself, actually, but the whole Nike like space hippie thing or whatever, it's like, it's admirable to make stuff out of sustainable materials or recycled materials, but like Ben said, like, you gotta just make that across the board. Then if it's important, it's important. Then just use it in everything. Like, if you're just making a limited edition recycled shoe, you're just putting more stuff out. All you're doing is literally selling me your garbage. Like, you're just making that much more profit off this stuff. Like, it's still going to wind up in the same landfill, unless you're selling it to me in a recyclable box that's already like got postage. So when I wear it out, I can send it back to you and you guys are going to turn it back into another shoe. It doesn't really matter that it's made of the scraps off your floor if I'm just going to wear it and eventually throw it out, and it's going to end up in the dump anyway. All you did was kind of move that forward, and like I said much, much earlier, as far as like seeing things cycle through, remember Nike Considered? Remember that was kind of a big deal, and like they did like a Stitch 2K4, and like they moved the Considered stuff into the Jordan 23, and then like, yeah, we're just not going to do that anymore. We're just going to go back to doing stuff the way we used to. It's like, again, if it's important, do everything like that.
Yeah.
So
otherwise, it's just another gimmick.
Yeah. So that's my question. Do you think that whether it's Nike Considered or whether it's, any of the number of things that, have been pushed as a conscious decision to change and make a better, a more environmentally friendly product, do you think that, like, I automatically assume that if it went away and never came back, then you probably weren't doing something that made sense for the environment anyway, right? Like, that's to me the reason why you would not have Nike Considered, for instance. Like, maybe you didn't go far enough with the whatever the things that were being done to be considered at that time. Do you think that that's like, do you think that's the case? Is it just that we've been like, it just was a marketing ploy? Because that's one of the conversations that we're going to have, over the next few days too, is like, I think we've all been on both sides of this, right? Like, I kind of go back to like my very first, days writing for Nice Kicks, 15 years ago, whatever. I remember getting a press release from multiple brands, but them talking about vegan friendly shoes, right? And I'm looking at the shoe and it's like, this is just all some form of plastic anyway. So like, this is not a solution to any of the problems that you think is vegan friendly, right? Like, the reality is you probably created more damage with this than not. But I think we're kind of getting to the point where, you know, at least more people are having that conversation. And I think it could be cool to see what people can do with it, because there's definitely a lot of smaller brands that have pushed different things, like you know, think of like pineapple leather and like this recycled gum shoe that happened a couple years back. And like, people are literally trying everything to do better. But like, when is, or what will be kind of the opportunity for brands to, one, get to a fully transparent place in it, but also two, almost like make it where it's, you know, it's like you know, the space hippies somebody mentioned in the comments, those shoes sold out, which to me is almost like counterproductive to them being a good thing compared to other, you know, for the environment, for the world, compared to other releases. So it's like, can we even have both of these things in the same breath, you know?
I mean, my thing is, like, again, like the space hippie thing was cool. It made sense to me. I did not buy a pair because, again, I already have like hundreds of pairs of sneakers. So my buying a pair of, you know, of sustainable ones makes no sense, because it's just adding another pair. I do not need another pair of shoes. But the thing is, and I will leave on this note so people can talk, and it's getting late on the East Coast, but, you know, it's kind of like, if you look at the space hippie as like the broccoli of sneakers and Dunks or whatever, like Doritos, you know, if you show a kid like, yo, this broccoli is better for you, but we're still going to have all these Doritos for free too, what do you think they're going to pick? You know, it's like, to me, like, that's where a brand needs to take some responsibility and be like, if this is better and you're going to market it on being better, the other side of that coin is to stop marketing the stuff that isn't good. And, you know, like, then if this is good and you want to sell this, well, the implication is the other stuff's bad. Well, maybe you should stop selling that. People are going to keep buying it because it's still available.
Yeah, that's, you know, actually like, a really interesting point.
They have to, you know, you can't just say like, this is good for you, this isn't. Oh, you decide. Oh my God, they bought the bad stuff. Oh, well, I guess we're going to have to keep producing it. At some point, you have to stop doing it. Otherwise, like, how sincere are you? Otherwise, you're just selling more shit.
Well, so that is actually an interesting point too, because not to pick on, you know, most of the people that are watching this and that are going to, you know, tune in for this for the next few days. But like, I think you and I have had this conversation many times, Russ, where like, we as the sneaker enthusiasts, whatever you want to call it, like, we don't really matter in the big picture, right? Like, the big picture is like, who's going to Kohl's and buying those $60 Nikes off the shelf? Like, that's what really matters in the long run, because that's the bulk of people, right? Like, you know, it's nice to think that, you know, like, selfish me, not thinking about anything else, thinks Nike really thought of me when they re-released the Air Flight 89 so I could finally get a couple of colorways that I really wanted for the past 30-something years, right? But I realize that doesn't really matter to their bottom line, right? Like, at all. You know, they're going to sell a very minimal amount of a retro product or of a hype shoe, you know, compared to the basic shoe, which makes me wonder, like, I guess, like, kind of almost contradictory to what you're saying of like, stop marketing like the basic shoes. It's almost like this is still going to go until the basic shoes are marketed and created out of these, you know, sustainable materials and these recyclable materials, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I'll give you this, and I'm going to leave on this thought, but you can make a space hippie line, however many shoes that was, however many pairs that was, and you can advertise it as being sustainable and being made of recycled materials, whatever. If Nike wants to make a difference and wants to make a difference in like pollution or sustainability or any of whatever those buzzwords are, they would be much better served by making the Air Monarch 4 literally like 1% more environmentally friendly than they would be putting out a limited line of a completely sustainable shoe. Because they're going to sell millions of pairs of Monarchs as opposed to like maybe what, 10,000 pairs of Space Hippies, maybe more than that, but still like they could do much more good if they made the Monarch a sustainable shoe. Because I mean, let's face it, Dad doesn't care what he mows the lawn in. Like you could make that out of fly leather or whatever you want to, out of some recycled material. Make that shoe 1% better. You're going to do more for the environment than you are by introducing some limited edition shoe. Are you interested in actually making a difference, or are you doing sustainability theater? To me, it's all still the latter.
I guess you could sort of like pitch the Space Hippie line, or like not pitch it, but it could be Nike's pitch to sneakerheads as like, hey, we can do cool, limited, like, and sustainable. I don't think it worked, but I think you could probably frame it that way in what they were trying to do. In the fact that they're still doing it. They're still coming out with colorways. So they either just have a lot of scrap that they want to sell to make room for more scrap, or I don't know. I think they tried to do it and it didn't work. And it's just, we're kind of left with this weird line of totally recycled shoes that are extremely limited and go for above what they should.
But
they should be like, sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, and that's where I think they're messing up, where it's like, instead of aiming sustainability at the 100,000 people who are super obsessive with every last detail and are into something super specific, why not aim it at the literal like hundreds of millions of people who make up your like gigantic base, who could care less what the shoe is like as long as it's $75 and they can wear it to mow the lawn. Like you have so much room there to work in like a sustainable product that people aren't even going to care about. If you just change make the insole sustainable, like you could still make the Monarch 4. It would look exactly the same. Literally not one person who bought it would even notice. But again, that's like, actual sustainability and not sustainability theater, which is what I think they want to do.
And like the clothing, like in the clothing too, the apparel, all you have to do is change the stitching to like recycled polymer thread and you're good to go. And every piece of clothing you do is going to be good from there, or not good, but it's better from there on out.
But I am going to take off, guys. I'm going to leave on the Monarch 4 note. Thank you. Thank you, Nick.
You bet. Thanks for hopping on, man.
Yeah, no doubt. Talk to you again.
All right, so I'm going to throw a new introduction in here. We talked a little bit earlier, Marrio. I don't know if you got to listen in, but we talked a little bit about the trend in like people creating their own shoes, and like the ability for guys like you who restore and customize shoes to actually. Basically, Russ Bengtson was saying like, $800 to buy whatever, Supreme Dunk and, on StockX or eBay or something after a release. Why wouldn't you just, for me, like, I'd rather give you $800 and see what comes from it, right? Have you seen like, I know you've been working on a lot of stuff lately, but like, have you had more inquiries? Has your business been growing with like the trend of like sneakerheads growing too?
It has, but it's actually grown with people who just have like hoarded stock, and it's just like these are 10 or 15 years old and they think they can still wear them, but as soon as they pull them out the box and they'll look clean, but as soon as they put them on, that first step, that air bubble's gonna pop, or that separation is just your foot's gonna be flopping around. And then that's when they get in touch with me. It's
interesting because one of the things that I think like we talked a little bit about, but like Russ mentioned, some of the Japanese companies that are kind of like combining, like customizing and recreating out of old product, right? And I think that we're in this place of like, I think it's a good thing. I think like it's going to be interesting to see how that part of the sneaker world progresses, but also like it's kind of fascinating because a lot of those materials just aren't built to last, right? Like the very finite number of shoes that, like, you know, thinking about like some of the stuff that Will collected back in the day, right? Like all those 90s basketball shoes, early 2000s basketball shoes were incredible at the time, but most of them you would never be able to do anything with now because the materials are just not, you know, like
there's some things you can't use that at all anymore. Like the flight posits, you can use maybe the uppers, but besides that, you're not going to be able to use that. There's some midsoles where they're just not usable anymore because they'll crumble after a certain time. But what I'm seeing is a lot of people doing the hybrid swaps where they're kind of like how the MLB players just have the Jordan 1 uppers and a completely, I think it's the Mike Trout sole, midsole, outsole. I see a lot of that lately.
That's kind of fascinating because like I'm one of those people who's obviously a big baseball fan, right? And I think Will and I have talked about this, but like I always wonder why like baseball and like custom cleats, why it's taken so long, right? Like we've been paying attention since Ken Griffey at the very minimum, right? Like some of us longer than that, but like for some reason we're in this weird place that like it just, I don't know. Will, do you think we'll actually see baseball become important in sneakers? Like thinking about like, you know, I think about Jacques, right? And how much he plays golf and how much he's more excited about, you know, golf releases at this point than he is sneaker releases, it seems like. But like baseball seems to be kind of like this missing piece of the sports world that just does not connect to the sneaker consumer.
Yeah, I think as the culture grows, and I mean, I wouldn't even think golf would beat baseball, to be quite honest with you, just with the, you know, your history of golf being a very proper, like, you know, wearing that almost dress shoe looking shoe to play golf in. Like, I mean, Harold Varner, right? Like, I mean, he is absolutely changing, you know, I mean, he's probably one of the first, maybe only Jordan brand golf athlete. And he's not even a huge deal. I mean, he's a decent name, but he's not like a Tiger Woods name by any means. But, you know, I think baseball, for whatever reason, I mean, just lagging behind it. I don't know if it's just because of, like, I grew up playing baseball. So, I mean, I feel comfortable saying this. It might be the types of guys that grew up playing baseball just also weren't into like sneakers as much. And I think as the culture grows and as more people get into it, then like let's make some Jordan 4s with spikes on the bottom for, you know, baseball, because that's now popular because it's more just overall the culture is growing.
I mean, if I can chime in as well, for both the two sports you guys mentioned, baseball and golf, there's always this, I don't want to say antiquated, but there's a lot of history associated with those two sports. And what I can think of as a baseball neutral, if not even a casual fan, the high point for me in terms of my baseball fandom was the 90s, because you had these players that transcended the game that we just don't have anymore. So you look at global football, you look at American football, you look at basketball, we can all have players that we can think of that come to the front of our minds that transcend the sport, and we're just following them because of the charisma. I don't have that with baseball, and granted, I'll be the first to admit I don't know enough about baseball. But even something like golf, where you've got, and I'm probably going to butcher the guy's name, Bryson DeChambeau, is he the gentleman that just keeps hitting bombs? As a neutral, that's captivating to me. So whatever he may be wearing, I want to be like, yeah, let me get a piece of that, because that's the dude that tees off really well. And for baseball perspective, it's just, how can I get excited about Mike Trout if I'm not a baseball guy? And I do see traces of it. So you guys had mentioned the fact that we see the Jordan kind of mashup in the cleat. I remember almost 5-6 years ago, and I know this because my buddy helped design the shoe, Miles Struman, and like I said, I'm going to get butchered for these pronunciations. He wore the Mamba Mentality 2, which is a takedown basketball shoe, and he converted it to the cleat version, and he was getting a lot of pub and a lot of acclaim because, hey, this is unlike anything we've seen before. And that made me stand up and at least pay attention to it. And I think it's something like that that's going to eventually break through and kind of get baseball where it needs to be, which is right on that same pantheon of transcendent sports that have these really charismatic athletes.
Yes. So I think that there's a real, and maybe this is just me like being in a sneaker bubble, right? But like, I think if your career is in any way a form of entertainment, whether that's a baseball player, a Formula One driver, an actor, it doesn't really matter, right? If you are a public figure of any kind, you should probably actually just be wearing cool sneakers, because it's only going to be better for you if you're able to actually, like, you don't even have to. Somebody asked earlier, like, do you have to know a certain amount to be a sneakerhead? And like, to me, no. Like, you just have to get the excitement. You have to feel like this is something I want to talk to somebody about, right? And I think that if you're an entertainer at this point, like, you should probably be considering that, whether that's your stylist or your manager or whomever, right? Because ultimately this opens up more opportunity for you to connect with people, right? It doesn't have to be like just the off-whites, right? We've seen it with some of the YouTubers, and I don't want to like pick on anybody, but some people that are not into sneakers over the past like 3-4 years went heavy into wearing sneakers in their videos. And like, part of me is like, yeah, he doesn't actually know what's going on. Part of me is also like, that's genius, because now people that weren't paying attention to you before are now going to see, some crazy release that you had access to or were sent because you posted it on Instagram or it's on your YouTube video. And now it's all of a sudden you have a very like kind of just this new connection to the consumer, right? But what's fascinating to me about baseball specifically, and the reason why I brought it up, obviously the Griffey's retroing this year, like, I love that shoe. I didn't need this year's. I got the last one. I'm still happy with that, but I'm happy to see it come back, because I do think that that's an important element to the game of baseball. But baseball is a sport that you don't have, like, I understand why Formula One doesn't have a connection to the sneaker community. I understand why football doesn't have, American football doesn't have a connection to the sneaker community on the same level, right? Because like, you don't know what that person looks like under the helmet. Maybe in racing you do a little bit more because there's more publicity going on, and it's a very finite number of people. So like, if you only have to remember 20 to 30 people, it's much different than 20 or 30 people on the field at the same time, in regards to like the NFL, right? But I'm wondering, like, with baseball, it's completely off, right? It doesn't, like, I get that there's no sneaker connection to it. Like, I think Varian said in the chat, sneakers is basketball and hip hop. But like, Michael Jordan was not hip hop. Michael Jordan was the furthest thing from hip hop. Michael Jordan didn't like rap music, but he also played baseball. I mean, I've got like Michael Jordan baseball caps back here because of Michael Jordan, right? And I've got obviously Michael Jordan shoes because of Michael Jordan. And I don't want to make it just about Michael Jordan, but like, there was an obvious connection to baseball. And I think that the success of Griffey, the toying with baseball that Jordan did, like, I don't understand why that didn't become a thing, because it really didn't matter if it was on the baseball diamond or not, right? Like, most of us weren't interested in what Jordan wore on the baseball diamond until years later, but we were interested in what Jordan was doing because he was Michael Jordan, which is why we were like, oh my God, Air Jordan 9 or Air Jordan 10 cleats, mind blown, right? Like, it just seems like a missing piece, and I might be going too far down my own fandom runway here, but it just seems like, how do we how is sneakers as a whole going to evolve to capture more of these audiences, right? Because as a business and as like a hobby, whatever we want to call this obsession that most of us have, it's only going to be interesting with new people coming in. It's only going to be interesting if like, for instance, like a couple weeks back, a kid was walking through our neighborhood as I was taking the dog out wearing Reebok Question Iverson Classics. If you would have told me that a 16 to 20-year-old kid was going to wear that pair of shoes, like I would have just been like, no way. I would have bet anything against it because I just don't expect to see those shoes. But yet, like, here he is, like, how did you get this shoe? Like, what made it special to you? Like, there's so many questions I have. So for you guys, what do you think the missing pieces are in the puzzle of sneakers or the big picture of sneakers right now? And are there ways that we're going to see other people and other interest groups kind of ebb and flow? It's like sneakers massively popular, but now we're not as popular as, let's say,
Top
trading
Shot.
cards or Top Shot. Yeah, like, there's the ceiling is way higher now for everyone, right? Because there's crazy amounts of energy around those things. So
to me, it's kind of a couple different things. You had mentioned the relationship between hip hop and basketball and sneakers, right? And let's use Michael Jordan as an example. I'm sure all of us have some lyric that we've listened to in the past 20 years that talks about how awesome the rapper is because he just compared himself to Michael Jordan, who is really awesome at basketball. Compare and contrast that with baseball, where unfortunately, if there's any sort of baseball-related Michael Jordan rhyme, it's probably used to make fun of something or fun of someone. So there's that component of it as well. And in that realm of, okay, what are new areas that could kind of widen the sneaker bubble? Let's look at what happened at the inauguration, right? I think it was Kamala Harris's nephew-in-law who had the Dior 100 or the Dior ones. And I know as much as anybody that we're all quote unquote sneaker heads or sneaker guys here. I'm sure all of us got at least one text saying, "Oh, did you see that? Like, that's awesome. That's you, isn't it? Like, hey, like you must have real big insight on this." And it's like, yeah, it's a cool shoe. It's a cool moment, but I don't know how people kind of expand that bubble. And I always had this weird theory where it's like maybe StockX is the gateway drug for people because they decide I'm going to spend $600 on my first sneaker. Well, I like sneakers. I don't like paying $600 for them, but how do I do that? But anyway, that's just me rambling. I've got to go, but this has been awesome. Thank you guys. And it's worth the price of admission just to hear Russ talk about broccoli versus Doritos. So if nothing else,
it's a pretty crazy analogy. Later, Rohit. Thanks, man.
Nice to meet you. Yeah, I mean, I think that like, oh man, what was I thinking a second ago? With like baseball and basketball, I guess baseball is just not, or I guess in general, there aren't as many for like sneakers. There aren't like moments. Like you don't see like there aren't like Jordan's doing things in the one and then people could go out and get Jordan ones. And then like you don't see people doing something like in an attainable shoe these days that you can go out and get. So there's not really like a storytelling attachment to it. I think that there's like, it's not a storytelling. It's just like a sort of a natural, like, oh, wow, this shoe became popular because of something like after it released. There's no more of that. It's just like, what's the next colorway that's coming out? It gets hyped up, it releases, and then it either sustains or dies. And so there's no like lasting element because one, there's too many shoes coming out. There's, sneakers releases twice, 3 times a week. And you can't really like keep up, and there's not like one shoe that can kind of stick out and sustain itself enough to be like keep staying cool, have someone like stand out and do something in it. Or like if it was a shoe that was like in the shot in the inauguration that was, maybe a Jordan 1 that was just hovering above retail, like $200 or something, then maybe that shoe would become a little more iconic and we could have something to talk about and they could like retro it in 20 years or whatever. But I just don't think that happens in like the same way that you see Jordan 1 or Jordan like dunking from the free throw line, and then you have that colorway of the three forever is like, this is the free throw line dunk. It just doesn't happen.
So I guess this is kind of to Russ's point. Like, he was talking about how, like, you know, the moment of the marketing moment is just at the point of purchase, right? Where it's not about like stories behind it, and it's not about, you know, kind of the memories. Do you think that those memories or those moments can exist or can be manufactured by the brands? Because I think we're in this weird spot where, let's take another sport like right, Naomi Osaka winning, you know, recently should have been a moment where there should have been a shoe tied to that for people's memory, right? But I think it's almost like we're almost like immune to these moments as sports moments now, right? Like, it takes so much, and now on top of it, thinking about the NBA being the closest connection to, you know, the sneaker world, generally speaking, now those moments are turned into Top Shot moments. It's not even about, you know, a long-term thing. It's literally right now, buy this and put it back on the marketplace to sell it. You know, it just makes me feel like, you know, can we get to a point where the moments actually matter again? Because we're also being bombarded with them, right? Like, if you're a fan of a player, right, you not only see the shoes that they wear on Instagram that day, you see the shoes that they carry down the tunnel or wear in the tunnel. Then you see them on court, potentially swap at halftime or maybe quarter, depending on who it is. So you've got 6 shoes per day to remember, like, because you're a fan of this one person. And it's almost like, you know, it's great to see all this stuff as somebody who's just genuinely curious about, I want to know what LeBron wears, right? Like, I just think that's interesting. But at the same time, it makes it impossible for me to even care or want the actual products almost.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it's a lot of just instant gratification right now, where there is no like feeling at all. And Nick, you and I have kind of talked about this, like, you know, my days kind of doing the brand management of Force Field. It's like, man, we would work so hard on building up to a shoe release. Shoe release would sell out, and then it's all over, and then all that hard work is just like gone, you know. To kind of say it that way, it just like, man, like, all right, well, every Saturday we're just building up, and then boom, it's gone. But I think even now, man, like, I've got probably 100 stories or more from like the 90s and 2000. I've got 0 from the last decade, other than I pushed a button and tried to enter a raffle and got a sneaker, and it showed up on my doorstep, and it sits in a box, or I wore it a couple times. You know what I mean? Like, but I've got 100 stories of, met the mall security guy who would let me in early to wait outside finish line, and met 3 other dudes who were doing the same thing. And there's so much more to like the chase, and looking for like Nike sample sales in the newspaper to see if there was a local rep selling samples. Like, you just don't find that anymore. Like, it's just, now it's on this thing and it loads up, and you hit, I want them, and your chances is 0.00001% that you'll get them. And if you do, it's all transactional.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I mean, it's just, there's so many different places to go with all that too, because like, part of it is like, I want to just be like, one, I want to like go back to all the like nostalgia stuff that like I actually, you know, care about or am interested in, and like have Marrio restore the stuff for me so I can actually wear it again. And then part of me is also like, I just want to go wear a pair of Chucks and not think about it. You know, it's kind of it's a catch-22 of like where we're at with all of this stuff. So,
but I think guys that are entering it now, this is what they know. Like, I have buddies that are now like getting into it 20 plus 30 years after I was ever into it. And now it's like, this is their normal. Like, this is the only thing that they know. And so, you know, you got guys like us that, you know, in the 90s and 2000s, we have all those stories. But now it's, well, they have these stories of, there's a shop down the street that I can find $1,000 pair of shoe that I would never be able to find in my wildest dreams back in the 90s, just from the accessibility standpoint. So, you just have different entry points of people that get into this scene, and we have our stories, they have their stories. But it is tough because I'm like the guy that's the old dude that says, get off my lawn, and like, let's go back to the old like way we used to do this. Right. But to the guy that just started doing it a month ago, he doesn't know anything different. This is the scene for him.
And even like for people, maybe speaking to like you saying it's the new normal, even to people that have been in this for like now 3 or 4 years, and they kind of are starting to consider themselves like real aficionados or something. This is still, it's the normal for them too, because the whole like stores had to raffle things started with some of the early Yeezy, like Adidas Yeezy models, if I remember correctly, where Adidas started telling retailers, you have to raffle this. And that's when like Nike implemented the same thing. Sneakers was starting to pick up, Adidas did the app, and it started to become like, that's, for 5 years now, it's kind of been this like, hey, can I have the sneakers? And they're like, no. And it's just kind of like, that's it's such a weird normal that it's also been, for me, it feels like such a long time. It's like it's mostly the normal that I'm used to as well, but it's like, it 5 years feels weird.
Well, and it's like fast forwarded, right? Like we're moving at light speed because so many things come out too on top of that.
Yeah, like Shopify is changing the way that their sort of like bot release works every few months, and like, so the bot, like all the resellers like have to change their tactics constantly too. And so it's like, yeah, it's lightning fast now. It's just going to get weirder and weirder. Nike's probably going to have to change sneakers.
Yeah. Well, so that's something that I also wanted to kind of bring into the conversation with this whole, event is like, I'm friends with people all across the spectrum in sneakers. Whether that's somebody who's casually into sneakers and occasionally buys a retro, or, people that are making a living in it, but also like people that are, selling bots or creating bots, building bots, and like the technology side of it. So I think that that's also an interesting piece to the puzzle, is like, I wanted to have like more conversations collectively with this, kind of this, event that we're doing, but also because I think my perspective and, guys like Will who are around my age, and I'm going to bring in another person here who's also around our age, but like the perspective of like, let's say the older generation of sneakerheads is, we hate bots, right? Like that's just the general narrative. Like the sneakers app is terrible, bots suck, I didn't get a shoe, we're mad at the world, blah, blah, blah. The reality is like, there's a lot of young kids that are building these bots. There's a lot of guys that are older, people that are older that are building these bots too. And I think that it's just a piece of the puzzle now, where it's I don't think anything that happens in sneakers is inherently evil, because like you said, the raffle thing happened because of the demand, right? The sneakers app now is going to push forward the technology behind apps to keep apps staying, under high demand, even from bots. And like you said, Shopify shifting to address, people using bots. All these things are things that inevitably help. But I want to introduce this guy that you might know.
Oh,
Jacques Slade. And just kind of loop you in. We're talking about. I was basically saying how we're moving into these conversations that we're about to have over the next four days, and how I'm hoping to kind of not necessarily change anyone's perspective or change the narrative around the conversations, but at least have an open dialogue about all of the things that we typically don't like to talk about in sneakers, whether that's, the sneakers app or bots, people, stealing ideas, all these things. But what do you think about sneaker bots? What's your first you could give it the knee-jerk reaction when somebody says bots to you in regards to sneakers, Jacques.
My first thought is, damn, I didn't get those sneakers, which is
Didn't get them.
didn't get them. Yes, hashtag Saturday. That's my first thought. As you know, as someone that's been, that does like the media side of sneakers, I think of it as both ways. I think of if I was a young kid or if I had the programming knowledge, is this something that I would do? And I don't know that my answer is no, especially if I was like younger and in college and this is something that I grew up loving. Like if there was a way that I could get like Jordan's jersey or something like that, or Jordan's game or some piece of Jordan's game when I was a kid watching him play, and all I had to do was program something on the computer, I'm not sure that I would have not done that for the older culture that was like, no, that's not how you get the game. You got to work for it. I'm not sure I would have followed that line of thinking. And that's just the reality of it. When you're young and like you want a piece of cool. You want cool to be a part of who you are. You want it helps identify who you are, and having access to those things or having ways to get those things that other people don't necessarily have. It's a bit of a social currency. So those bots that get you the shoes make you cooler in school, which may end up getting you more friends and having more people like you. Now, whether they stay your friends or not, that's a different conversation. But they put you in a position that we all want to be in high school and in college or in those earlier years in life is popular. As you get older, you realize how fleeting something like that is. But when you're younger, that really help build your persona and build your personality and how you interact with humans when you're older. So this probably went way deeper than you meant by that question. But that's just kind of where my mind goes when I think about that kind of stuff. Because as an older guy, I think about kids. And I think about how I acted when I was younger and how the older generation didn't necessarily agree what I was doing. So, yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, I definitely would. I would hope that if I was 16 or 17 right now, I would use bots as a way to teach myself how to code and build something even bigger on top of that, right? Like,
right.
That's at least my optimistic look at me as a 16, 17-year-old. If I'm really honest about it, I would have been like probably hanging out behind the high school, getting into trouble, and none of that would actually have happened. But
yeah, you would have been like Will. Like, I get it. Yeah.
And look how that guy turned out.
Yeah, it's so one of the conversations that we're going to have in the next few days is actually with a few people that run bots that from guys that do it on YouTube, but also guys that build the bots, sell them to other people, and then guys that are just casually like, hey, I bought these so I could get sneakers, who also like turn around and kind of share that with the community in a sense too, right? But I think that it's really fascinating because it's like sneakers has become a constant battle versus like being the old man that yells at the kids on the lawn and being the person that, really admires that, like, some of these guys that will be on in the next few days have literally been, like building and working on bots and apps and various forms of technology driven sneaker related things since they were like 13, 14 years old. And to me, that's mind blowing. And I can't help but be optimistic about the future of all this stuff because of that, right? Like that's initiative that I absolutely would not have had at that young of an age. Like I would have rather been riding around listening to music at insane volumes just to annoy the neighbors than to ever lock myself in a room and learn how to do that, right? Like it's that part of it is really fascinating to me. So I guess
think about ourselves, like think about your 13-year-old self. Like how bad did you want to be cool, or did you want to be like the older kids? Like it was insane. Like I wanted to be like the older kids that play basketball in my neighborhood so bad. I would have done anything in the world to have the shoes that they had. the shorts that they had, to walk the way that they walked, to have the jumpers that they had. I would have done anything in the world back then when I was 13. And all I had to do was program something on the computer. Man, if it was that easy, if I could program my NBA 2K character and it gave me real life attributes, that's insane. You know what I mean? My attributes for my 2K character that I made after Big Hank that I watched dunk basketballs all the time when I was 13. If I could have just entered that into my 2K character and plugged myself in, and all of a sudden I had those attributes, God, man, you guys wouldn't. I'd be LeBron right now. I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah, so
Who let him in? Who let him in? But I think honestly, I can't be mad at bots, and I'm not mad at bots because I think in every aspect of the sneaker culture from every generation, there is some sort of bot type of technology, whether that be it was networking, when I was doing it more so. I mean, it was when you waited in line for 2 hours and there was always 3 or 4 guys in line that the manager of Finish Line knew, and he was like, oh yeah, I got your pair right over here. And you're like, what? That can't work like that. But it's part of the game, and it's part of getting let in early by the security guard or this and that and the other, or sitting in chat rooms back in the Nike Talk days and just hustling the DMs on the side and be like, yo, do you know anybody that works at Nike and this and that and the other? And there's some aspect in every single generation of hacking the system to get what you want. And today it just happens to be bots. Back then it was networking, and who knows where it will be in another 10 years.
For me, I just, bots or whatever. I get super annoyed when they start to cross over into other interests of mine, graphics cards, collectibles, things like that. And it's frustrating sometimes. Damn it, you're supposed to be over here, not over here. Leave me alone with my shit. I'll leave you alone with yours, and occasionally get the sneakers I want. And that's all I can really do with them.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point though that you make. The networking aspect of this whole thing has always been the most important piece of it, right? Whether that's knowing somebody, now with a bot, or somebody that's building them, then you can buy them without paying resale, because bots resell for more than sneakers. But it's always about the network and the people that and the people that that are willing to have conversations with you, because whether you're trying to get shoes or you're trying to, Jacques and I have known each other a really long time. We've probably had 5,000 conversations over the last 10 years. Most of them are usually crazy harebrained ideas, and most of them never happen. But the fact that we are able to talk to each other about it means that one day, some cool shit happens. And I think that's also a part of the bot thing to me. Is it's just what Will said. It's just another piece of the puzzle of look, I want to know all of you guys, because all of the different things that you do, they're connected to sneakers. We're probably going to do stuff outside of sneakers more than we do stuff in the bubble of sneakers.
Yeah.
But once you find people that you vibe with and you kind of understand, and you can ebb and flow out of conversations easily, you can have fun, you're going to do cool shit. And if cool shit is building bots together, and, like Jacques said, being 13 and supplying the seniors at high school with sneakers, more power to you. That's not for me, because I'm not thinking about I don't want to have to deal with buying shoes. I don't want to have to deal with when I see pictures of guys on the internet with 400 shoes behind them that they just got that nobody else could get. I just think my God, that's a headache. I don't want to have to think about having that. Yeah.
And when they pull them all out of the box,
I don't even want to pull a shoe out of the box to put it on at this point. I leave a couple pairs by the door every week, and usually I'm too lazy to even untie them and tie them. So it's just a completely different world compared to what I think the perception and the conversations that people have around it just fascinates me, because I'm just it doesn't affect me at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man. So now that we've got Jacques Slade on. Honestly, you know what's funny? This is how the sneaker world works. If you've watched me or done anything with me on the internet for the past 10 years, you could probably know, like, we'll be like hit and miss, hit and miss, hit and miss. So Jacques and Will and I have had like a text chain for probably about 4 years now. I don't think that we've collectively been on the same phone call / video call at any point in those 4 years, but here we are just to talk about sneakers. So that's sneakers to me, right?
That's true. I think that's
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
What's crazy to me is just thinking, I mean, all the different connections people can make, you know, through sneakers, and just like, no matter who you are, where you came from. I mean, I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana, and, you know, I mean, yes, basketball, et cetera, with IU and Purdue and all that. But man, my high school, there was one other guy that like was into sneakers, and just, I would go, I mean, it was weird for me to have more than like 2 pairs of shoes in my high school. Like, it was odd. You know, but I would go home and log on to the internet and connect with guys that were living in New York and Russ, you know, and LA and all sorts of places. And you could just, nobody really cared who you were, like, because you were connected by, you had a passion for sneakers. And just the doors that like it has personally opened up for me, like, has been incredible, that I never thought like shoes would connect so many dots in my life over time. It's insane.
Well, and I think we're like at like a crazy point too, because the massive popularity, right? Like, you know, like Marrio for sure wouldn't have been able to do what he does 5 years ago to the level of success that he's doing it now, right? Like 10 years ago, you wouldn't have people wanting to restore shoes, make customs, fix any of the shoes, because like it just wasn't really a conversation. And like, I mean, there's so many moments in my career that like I just look at, like, Jacques and I have sat and just looked at each other like, we're here because of this. We're here because of sneakers. Even like conversations that I've had with Ben where, like, you know, Ben's kind of like, he's like got side hustle and like, you know, I think like everybody is diversifying all the things that they're doing and they're interested in so many ways. And sneakers, to me, still, at the end of the day, except for maybe being a Giants fan and having people say go Giants everywhere I go, sneakers is the easiest conversation piece I could possibly have. And that is like, you know, it's like the entry to so much opportunity, right? Like, whether that's, you know, brand management or writing or customizing, restoring, like all of the different aspects of this stuff that we, you know, like are constantly in now. We almost don't even get to see it because we're just all in it now, where, you know, I think Rohit brought it up a little bit ago, but like that moment when somebody that's not into sneakers goes, hey, that's you. This is one of those people that's like you, that's into sneakers. Like, this is a sneakerhead moment, right? I saw it at the inauguration. Like, that's the funniest stuff to me, because it reminds me that there's still like this massive world outside of it, even though this world of sneakers is so massive now. It's fascinating to me, but I don't know. I'm kind of at a loss for words, because I'm starting to think about like all the different aspects of what's about to, like, the conversations that are about to happen over the next few days, and like just how I've been able to connect with all the people like you guys and the other people that are going to be on. And like, it's just crazy. Like, it's crazy that sneakers just like continues to be a talking point, a way for us all connect. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to hop on and chat with me, for sure.
For sure.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
I usually don't get on panels with Will, but for you, man, I'm all for it. I'm all for it.
Is there a mute button anywhere? Did you find that yet? Jock, there's an X at the bottom that says leave studio. I don't know if you want to hit that. Now would be a good time to eject. I don't know why you're coming at me so much tonight, when Nick was the one before you even got on, called you old. So
I love you.
saying, I'm just
I
saying.
love you. Because I love you. You're my
I
best friend.
I
My
love you
best
too.
friend, we are.
I love you too.
No, but I think honestly, I think what you said is really important in talking about like what Marrio does now. I think that is going to be like the next frontier for sneakers. I think the community is getting so fed up with not being able to get stuff that it's going to force them to look inward. You know, in an instance, look at what they already have and what they've worn down and what they really love, and they're going to want to get those like return to new, so like the old new. And this also kind of goes with the whole sustainability angle, where like, you know, you want sustainability doesn't mean making stuff with like recycled stuff. It means using what you already have. And I think people are going to start using the stuff that they already have. And people like Marrio are going to bring that new stuff, be able to bring that stuff back to life, so people can have those memories, have those, you know, remember those moments, and have something like brand new. And like, that's going to deepen the sneaker conversation more than, oh, those are hype. Oh, those are like worth $1,000. Like, no, these are the shoes that I got when I was a 12th grade senior. It's the first pair that I bought with my own money. And I sent them out to Marrio, and he restored them for me. So like, this is walking history that I'm wearing. And I think those are the stories that are going to start being told, because the hype is only going to be able to go so far before it turns people away.
I 100% agree. It's funny because like, so Marrio is part of our like Discord community, right? And we did like a trivia night a couple weeks back. And one of the conversations we had is about one of the shoes that's behind him on the shelf there, like his pair of Tiffany Dunks that he's restoring for somebody. And the extent that he's going through to bring that shoe back to life, like, I mean, I don't know what's behind me, but I have a pair somewhere back here that's pretty beat up that I've worn for a long time that will need the same thing at some point. And it's funny because the memories of me of like trying to get them when they came out, as somebody who's like, you know, in Sacramento, always in San Francisco, you know, like hanging out at Huff and wanting to be a part of all of that stuff. Like, that shoe was kind of like one of the earliest of the like, whoa factors, right? And I don't dislike any of the newer stuff, but it's the one shoe that I bought multiple pairs of because it's like the one shoe I just beat to hell and, you know, like wear out and then get rid of and then buy another pair. But like, I would much rather just keep those pairs in rotation and do whatever I have to do, have Marrio work his magic to be able to keep that memory, as opposed to buying a new memory, which is a really interesting point, because we are at like this, we're at this point where the memories are like, Russ brought this up earlier, but we forget that like the memories are ours to make, right? Like, it isn't about the buying of the shoe necessarily. To me, it's like, hey, I wore this shoe, you know. I think of like the most poignant memory for me in terms of sneakers right now is like, I had a pair of True Blue 3s from 2001, and you know, it was I ended up getting them at Foot Action, Arden Mall in Sacramento. All the guys in the chat will know. Like, I mean, I went in like a week or two after they had come out. They were sitting on the shelf, picked them up, took them home, didn't wear them right away because I was going to save them for a good day to wear them, right? And my brother and I went to America Le Mans races at Sears Point before, you know, way back in the day. This is, you know, obviously 20 years ago now. And that was the first day that I put them on. Unfortunately, I'm not somebody that checks the weather. I mean, now I see it on the phone, but like, I didn't check the weather, and it rained like crazy. And I had brand new Jordan 3s, True Blues, shorts and a hoodie on, as I usually do. And I'm at the racetrack. Well, the racetrack is being rebuilt, so there's no paved roads up and down and around the track. It's all dirt, which turned into mud, which turned into me having like 4 to 5 inches of mud on the bottom of my Jordan 3s. And like, it totally ripped the paint off. It totally like demolished the shoes. But I also I cleaned them up a little bit afterwards, but that memory and having those is all about like that time I got to spend with my brother running around in the mud trying to like watch this race that was like, can't see anything because like the cars are spraying water up and like you're just it was just ridiculous. But it's a cool memory, and like to me that's always going to be the True Blue 3 is that to me now more than it is me as a kid seeing it at Foot Locker the very first time, even because that memory has replaced that original memory of like this was the more important thing to me and the time that I got to go with my brother to that first race. And those kind of things are, I think, where we're like on a pendulum swing. I think we're on a pendulum swing where we've gone so far to this like point of everything is about money and everything is about clout and everything is about like I have this and you don't. And most of us are not at the extremes of either of those. Most of us are somewhere in the middle. Yeah. And the further we go one way, the more we're going to swing back to what you said, Jacques, of like, you know, people are going to really appreciate the things that they have. And I think, you know, for better or worse, like that's going to be a really interesting thing for some of the brands to kind of grasp with as consumers reel in their spending on this stuff too.
Yeah. So something for them to definitely like the concept of one to rock, one to stock kind of loses its luster when you realize that you can just get that old pair restored. And it's almost like getting that old 60s car brought back to life, all the memories that you had back in that 60s car, whatever that Impala or whatever it is you were driving, like having those all come back, like the memories that were there, that's going to have more, it's going to weigh more on you than I think if you go, I have a new pair, I'll just put on the new pair. Like I have a pair of super beat up Jordan 3s that I'm sure people have seen on social media because I always post them. But when I get around to the point of having when they're so beat up that I'm like, all right, I need to get these restored, like that's going to be a story there as opposed to just pulling out another pair that I have sitting in a storage unit somewhere. Like that pair has a very specific sort of memories attached to it. And so I think getting rid of, I won't say getting rid of, you know, people are always going to have one to rock, one to stock because people want something brand new. But to be able to restore an old pair as opposed to just buying a new pair, I think that's going to be money pretty soon. So shout out to Marrio. We all need to invest in Marrio's business.
Yeah, seriously.
Invest in Marrio's business.
Great.
Yeah, guys,
no,
I think I'm
gonna actually helping out with the restores, because if anyone has a pair of Tiffany's, they don't want to spend. I don't even know the resale on Tiffany's what they are right now, but they could just buy a cheaper dunk and just keep the uppers of the Tiffany's and just rip off the new soles. And that's the same with the Jordan 1s. You see a lot of people restoring the 85s. They're just ripping off whatever general release Jordan 1 midsole, outsole, and sticking it on the 85s. The brands are helping a lot of the restores with recycling of different midsoles with like the Jordan 13s. I could just go buy a pair of 6 rings, same outsole, and they're helping me out. So I don't know. I think the brands are helping.
There it is.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
All right, guys, I'm gonna sign off.
Thanks
Good
for
talking to you. Thanks for
Ben.
having me, Nick.
Yeah, you bet. Have a good night, man.
All right,
everybody,
bro.
have a good one.
Ben's out of here. I'm gonna get out of here too. Actually, I was editing, so I need to finish editing so I can post this video tonight.
Yeah, it's all good. We're gonna wrap here anyway. I've been on here for 3 hours here in a couple of minutes, so it's been fun. I'm looking forward to the next few days. Thank you guys for helping me kick it off.
Absolutely.
Thanks to you guys for hopping on. Jacques, I'm looking forward to our conversation. Just got heard back from Friday. Tamara is actually going to hop on with us too, so that'll be a good conversation with Wex. So looking forward to it. But thanks everybody for tuning in.
Appreciate you having me on, you guys.
Appreciate
Nick. Yeah, of course. Take it easy, guys.
Nick. All right, Will.
All right,
Later, guys.
Later, guys.
Bye, guys.